It works on Leo too.
The aim camps were mad. Okay.
No head banging.
You do have a bit of an echo there.
I'm not banging boys in the butt.
Weren't you in that stream with Mr. He Who Shall Not Be Named?
Well, that you're gonna have to do better than that. Oh, okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay. Got it. All right. Yeah. Got the diabetes.
What do you call an Indian with no legs? Nakasasha.
That's on you for not pegging that disgusting fat land whale for what that was. Okay, that's on you.
All right. Yeah, we ran. I was gonna run with that because it was gonna be Smokey tonight, but then he had a power outage. So we ran with it anyway. But what's up, guys? This is an kind of an impromptu open room. I wanted to do this if I was feeling up to it tonight, and I do. I feel pretty good. So yeah, I'm here, and it was a great dumpster fire of a debate. I'm gonna let Leo speak first because he's the debater of the hour. Now, I did tell CJ, I don't know if CJ saw, but I said I'd be nice if CJ came. So maybe CJ will show up, and I'll be nice if he does. I promise. So what's up, Leo, and what's up, Broom?
So the first thing I want to say is the funny thing is somebody's got an echo.
Oh, that's because my share screen's on. All right, so I'll remove that. You're good now.
Okay. So me and Steven actually wanted it originally. We had planned for a Mad Dux and CJ versus the both of us. But Mad Dux initially denied. So I think it was Steven went to Smokey and asked him, and Smokey said yes. And then he backed out and Mad Dux stepped up. So it all worked out.
Yeah.
I noticed that the crux of the debate wasn't really on socialism or capitalism. They consistently strawman socialism as something that it's not, because statism and socialism are not the same thing. There are very, very few social economists that would agree with that. Neither a CJ nor Maddox ever addressed anything that I brought up in terms of market socialism and worker cooperatives at the best benefit. Maddox just wanted to talk about how he's an entrepreneur and a business owner, so he knows more than everybody on everything, and that was he just wanted to interrupt people. But yeah, I had fun.
Yeah, it was a good one. Go ahead, Mr. Parker. But it was a good debate. I love my dumpster fires. So
yeah, it was a very nice debate considering how triggered Maddox got when Steven brought up the whole thank you, Maddox, for not taking a week off to prepare for this debate, and I like the point when CJ's like, you guys are hypocrites for participating in capitalism if you guys are socialists, because whatever. And there's some points where I question if CJ actually read anything by Marx or like Engels.
Yeah, I do too.
I can believe that it's the Communist Manifesto, but in terms of Das Kapital, I actually have that in PDF form. It's 887 pages long. Like literally,
that's
if you buy it in book form, it's like 4 inches thick.
I don't think he read any of them.
I could believe that CJ has read parts of it, but in terms of reading the whole thing,
parts are the
I'm
clip
not gonna
notes.
say he didn't, but I am a little.
I kind of the thing that I thought was interesting about it was that Mad Dux goes off on this whole thing where he's like talking about like business regulations and stuff. And he's acting like there's a difference between like the socialist system where the government lets you do things, and then there's the system that we currently have where you just get to do whatever you want. And it's like, okay, I'm a state level bureaucrat. If you want to form a business here, you actually have to apply for a business license, and you have to decide what kind of business license you're going to get. If it's depending on the profession, you might need additional professional licensing. You know, if you're like medical or real estate or something like that.
Isn't the state level Department of Commerce involved in that as well?
Exactly. So the idea that like these guys are like, you know, well, here's the thing, like, you know, the way that it works now, it's just like, oh, I get to do whatever. I'm like, no, you do not. The reason that you can do things like form an LLC or a limited partnership or a tax corporation or any of these other kinds of things is because they exist under the government law as recognized business institutions. You don't just get to do those things and then pretend like, well, I got to do whatever I want, and then the government had to just recognize that. That's not how it works.
Exactly, and that plays to the idea that I got it because Maddox is like, well, who's gonna tell these companies to be worker cooperatives? And I'm like, I mean, I see where you're coming from, but you cannot have a system without some authority, some structure of authority that maintains it. Whether it's a government or not, you cannot have any capitalism is maintained through an authoritative structure. I mean, it's just simple as that. Yeah. And so, like, this idea that, well, the government has to tell us when we can be worker cooperatives. Well, yes, but you also have to go through the government, like you said, Jeff, if you want to start an LLC, or I think like LPC, LCs, S corporations, C corporations, and things like that.
And here's the thing, the whole idea, like if they want to talk about like worker bailouts or any of this other kind of like, you know, these socialist systems, the idea of forming an LLC is that when you form a company under the rubric of an LLC, if that company loses all its money or loses all its resources, the company just dissolves. It disappears. The people that were involved in that company or any other individual, they're not held liable. So they can't, no one can come after the personal assets of any other individual involved. So if these
limited liability corporation.
Right. If these ding-dongs want to talk about this idea, like, well, it just should be just rip and run whatever we want. Okay, well, can you imagine if the situation were the case where you didn't have a legal immunity to the customers that you disenfranchised or defrauded? Yeah, they can come directly after you. Now, in this case, your company can just fold up and disappear. So, you know, good for you. I love hearing these guys give these like whack ass like descriptions. Like, well, here's how I understand capitalism. Like, yeah, your Sesame Street description of capitalism doesn't actually fucking work, because the actual capitalism that you're talking about is supported by the state and probably requires some significant reforms. What Leo was presenting was the idea of like, hey, you can have a co-op that does this kind of stuff. You change the legal organization, change the legal representation. And they're like, how does that work? I have no idea. Yeah, the same way it works now.
Leo, specifically, you defined your terms, I thought, rather brilliantly at the very beginning. You defined, hey, I'm going to be presenting market socialism and a co-op. I can't think of the word that I'm trying to think of, pull out of my ass right now.
Structure?
Yeah, like a co-op system based on that. And you know, like CJ's big response to that was, well, you know, co-ops exist in capitalist societies, so no brainer.
I love it.
I mean, that was fucking great. But like, his main thing, I think, was what you pointed to at the very beginning, and then I'll let you go because I cut you off. But you know, they don't have a clear understanding of what socialism is, or even the capitalism that they're trying to promote and argue for here in America. Because CJ kept going to free market. Like, there is no free markets here in America. What the fuck are you talking about?
They're never had, like, even in
they don't even exist. I don't think
free market. Yeah. I did want to say really quickly, I would like Brenton Langle to come in, because I've read like 2 different articles on on the Catalonia issue. So like I said, it may very well be that I just got that completely wrong, because now that I'm thinking about the articles that I read, they might not have been the most reliable. But I also wanted to answer a question from Sphincter of Doom. He said, I think I missed your clarification about the quote, if it failed, it wasn't socialism. Would you mind repeating your clarification? So I'm willing to repeat it in terms of what I had said, but to be honest, I've only read like 1 or 2 articles on that Catalonia thing. I don't really know the most about it, honestly. And I just want Brenton to come in just so that I can learn, because he seems pretty well educated on that matter.
I've seen him in a few debates, and I would say he understands socialism far better than I do.
Yeah, he's definitely a comrade, I would say. Yeah. But what I was saying is that if somebody's trying to implement socialism, but then they fail at it, that doesn't mean that socialism failed. Yeah, especially if they're being suppressed by some system with interests that go against what that socialist structure would implement.
And the thing that I always think is interesting about these discussions, especially when it's like, it's socialist versus capitalist and stuff. The obvious thing is to figure out, like, okay, well, will the socialists misconstrue what capitalism is? It's usually a pretty good bet that the capitalists will misconstrue what socialism is. Mm-hmm. But in the case that we saw tonight, it turned out to be true. The capitalists didn't totally understand capitalism. Right, because they kept talking about things like,
the government puts regulations, so it's not capitalism. I'm just like, oh,
exactly. God, they kept talking about things like free market, free market this and free market capitalism. That whole thing, that conflation of stuff has happened over the last 60 years, thanks to a lot of right wing media in this country. The idea that you can't have
damn it didn't work.
That you need a free markets or whatever. None of that has anything to do with capitalism. You can still have markets, you can still have trade, you can still have exchange. All that stuff still exists. Exactly. It existed before capitalism even was a theory.
Yeah.
This notion that these ding dongs end up like, well, if you don't have capitalism, I can't buy my phone. Like, that is not how capitalism works. That's not how trade works. That's not how any of this stuff works.
CJ literally said that during one part of this debate. He literally said, free markets equal capitalism, and capitalism is how economies have always worked.
Yeah.
No. Like, he literally, I wrote it down because I couldn't fucking believe it.
No.
I did want to say really quickly, Sunflower, feel free to come in. And I mean that genuinely. Any criticisms that you have, I genuinely would like to hear them. I want there to be some pushback in this after show, because I think it's good. I think it's healthy. Please come in. Brenton, like I said, if you're still in the side chat, please come in. I would love to learn more about the situation in Catalonia. I full well admit that I might have just completely butchered that. So if you're still there and you have the time, I invite you to come on in. Rage is nice. Everybody here is nice. You guys will be treated well.
If you did butcher that, how will we ever win back, Mad Dux? I mean, Leo.
Sorry, I'm having an interesting little sidebar about Smokey in the side chat with Sister Sunshine. I guess he has a criminal record that I need to go and watch the video. So
what?
Yeah, so I got stuff to watch now. Oh yeah, let me.
I don't know if I don't know if you've got your automatic ad turned on.
Yeah, I've got to turn my little view on, so I'll see if anybody else is back there.
Jim, meaning Forge.
Yeah, what's up? Is this the channel I have? So,
are you for all soy boys all the time? No, nothing. Sorry. If you were searching for all soy boys all the time, then you found them. This is pretty left wing.
I am a soy boy who's ready to be destroyed by facts and logic.
What just happened?
Faces do you have? You have 10 or do you have...
He's got 10.
I've got 10. I seem to be having some... I do seem to be having some issues because everything just kind of shut down on me. So it seems like we're back. So hopefully the channel will be good. I'm not sure what's going on. So y'all go ahead and talk. I'm going to look at things.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So I'm definitely on the capitalist side of the argument, and I think I just need your guys' help to understand the socialism a little bit better, because I think Jefferson's like spot on. Like sometimes we don't understand each other's arguments very well, and even if we like, and there's no guarantee of success with this. So I'll try my best to ensure that I understand it. So if you want to go, I guess, kind of like maybe outline some of the major points, and then I'll ask a few deep dive or I'll try to deep dive into some of those questions a little bit more.
One of the things that I can actually dive into a little bit, and it's one of the weaknesses that the economist Thomas Piketty pointed out. I haven't read his entire book yet. I've read, snippets and pieces of it back when it came out. One of the things that he came up with was that one of the issues that he found with capitalism is that it led to a lot of inherited wealth. And it led to a structural formation of inequality that was only going to get worse. It was just exponentially going to get worse. And the models that he put forth were pretty persuasive in proving that to other economists. So the idea that what I think ends up happening for a lot of people, like in Facebook circles or YouTube circles, is they end up talking about capitalism versus socialism. It ends up being about things like free trade and commerce versus government breadlines in this completely gray system, where the government gives you your loaf of bread and your bottle of wine and your jug of milk, and then that's what you get. That's not what we're talking about. Socialism, and any of these other kinds of economic systems also have systems of trade built within them. And systems of trade have pre-existed before capitalism. There's been this weird notion that's happened, and I think a lot of it's happened in the United States because in a lot of cases the Republican Party and a lot of political institutions have tried to do this thing where they've tried to... The Democratic Party has tried to do it as well, where this notion is that if you don't presuppose a notion of capitalism, then you don't get free trade and you don't get free commerce, right? Like if you don't have that, then you don't get these other things. But that's not actually what history points out. But before capitalism, and capitalism, I think, in its rawest sense, is the idea that you can accumulate a certain amount of property or a certain amount of means of production unto yourself that ends up kind of extrapolating wealth out to yourself beyond what the rest of the public ends up getting, right? So it means that if somebody tries to make an ethical argument that what we need is for all water to be owned by private companies, right? And so a lot of people get a little bit nervous about that. Huh?
I was talking to Marty. I was waving. I was waiting for her to look at the screen.
No.
And real quick, I want to apologize to the people that were sitting in the back. It should add you automatically, but it didn't. So
yeah,
apologies.
Dave said there's something going on. He's got to figure it out. So
So anyway, I'll wrap up my point this way. I think that a lot of what ends up happening in these discussions is that the conversation ends up becoming this thing where socialists don't think that commerce and trade should happen, and that capitalists think that we should have trade and stuff happening. That's not the argument. The problem that happens between capitalism and socialism is that socialism is about democratizing economic processes, just like we've democratized political processes. And the idea of capitalism is
fundamentally the same. That's Jeff's point, is that you don't need to remove market forces and market incentives under a socialist economy. You're just democratizing that process, but you're not removing these fundamental concepts of trade and commerce. You're just
in a way
switching how they operate.
I guess
I would like to chat about that with
because if you're requiring workplaces to be co-ops, you're not democratizing them. You're forcing them to be a certain way.
No, but
want to organize.
Hang on. I want to check you right there, because here's how it works right now. If you want to form a business right now, you need to form it according to how your state has established certain business relations. So you need to form an LLC or a limited partnership or a tax corporation or whatever. You have certain certain defined definitions and defined business relations that you have to establish with the state in order to get that business going. This idea that, like, well, I don't think the state has any right to do this. The state has already been doing this, has been doing this for hundreds of years.
But that's not an argument against it not being done anymore, right? Like, I'm not saying
it's being done right now. It has been being.
What I'm saying is
the problem is that you cannot have the maintenance of a system without some authority that maintains that system. And in a democratized society, the centralized government is probably going to be, and I want to emphasize the word probably, going to be the best way of maintaining that system. All systems, like our democracy, is maintained through an authority, but that doesn't remove the fact that it's a democracy.
Leo, what do you think about direct democracy?
But it's also like it's. I don't think democracy in of itself is inherently virtuous. Certain things shouldn't be held to be democratic. I mean, there are all sorts of evils in history.
Our founding fathers didn't think so either.
Right.
Exactly.
So,
that's why it's a republic,
I don't think it's sufficient to say we need to democratize this because it's democracy. Now, I'm not saying that is your argument.
Okay, but here's okay. Before you run off with that, the issue is usually presented in terms of this idea with capitalism versus socialism. With socialism, the government controls how these businesses form, and with capitalism, the businesses tell themselves how they need to form. That's not the case. With the system that we currently have right now, none of these capitalist organizations exist without the imprimatur of the government. Whether they're an LLC or a limited partnership or whatever organization or definition that they exist under the imprimatur and under the rubric of the United States government. They exist in that sense.
I don't disagree there.
If somebody wanted to say, like, well, what we should do is actually change these so that you don't have the capacity to arrange a business organization in the form or structure of a corporation, you have to arrange and structure it in the form of a co-op. The government could make those changes, and that could be a thing. If that happened, then you would have a very different business organization. It would be no different in terms of the relationship between the government's rule on business and how businesses get formed. It would just change the structure of the business that's formed given the government's imprimatur. That's the only thing that would change.
I want to pull a John Peterson here. Let's let Jim respond to that, and then Marty has her hand up, so she should go after.
Oh yeah. John isn't here, and I'm a terrible moderator. So
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot. So, like, I think that's a good way of kind of like starting the conversation. When it comes to incorporation, LLC, like all these forms are also taxes driven in many regards. So at some point, what I would challenge a little bit is your company's going to grow to a point where it can be democratized co-op at the beginning, but then it becomes a Republican form of government because you have to elect leaders in order to do things. You just can't have 80,000 people vote on the direction of the business. If not, the business won't. I mean, the idea here is that the business may not be able to be that agile. So there's that. That's a critique that I would have. But I think what I'm trying to get at too is like what do you guys mean? Like, so when you say democratic socialism, you're saying that 80,000 person company, everyone has rights to, I guess, to what they produce. Is that correct?
Yes.
In a sense, yes.
Okay. So if we're saying in a sense, let's clarify that so we understand it versus the sense, because senses we know don't always work very well. So like, let's definitely.
Okay, I just want to point out in the same way that we already have different types of corporations already, based on removing or mitigating certain types of legal liability, like partnerships, limited liability corporations, full-blown corporations, tax corporations, right?
The S corporations, yeah.
The S corporations. The reason that those things are built that way is because, so for instance, if you form an LLC, you're immune from the business losses being able to connect to your own individual possessions and wealth, right?
Okay.
Everything is wrapped up in the company, and part of that legal structure is structured around and backed up by the federal government. The idea of having
we're
certain
just repeating ourselves a little bit here. Like I'm trying to I'm trying to progress a little bit here.
I understand what you're saying. No, hang on. I haven't progressed to the next point that you were making. When you're talking about the idea of worker co-ops, right? This idea, right? There's this weird idea that happens, and this happens not. It doesn't just happen on, kind of capitalist opponents, but it also happens on the side of leftists. Is that they're going to create a one-size-fits-all business entity that manages to handle all of the kind of left-wing concerns that the socialists want to happen in a particular business entity, and mitigate all of the criticisms that the conservative kind of pro-business class would want. That's not necessarily going to be the case, because it's going to depend on the industry. So in those particular cases, you can still have worker-owned co-ops, but they're going to have slightly different relations in terms of like what their access is to things like, say, voter rights or any of that kind of stuff, relative to what kind of industry they're in. If they're in a commodity market where they're just manufacturing T-shirts, that's going to be slightly less risky than, say, a private company that has a license to work in something that is a public utility, or say a public resource like water or oil, or something like that.
I would be very careful to just discount risk that way, because at the end of the day, risk is risk for any business. At the end of the day, if a business doesn't, and this is kind of, I'm very careful, and I'm trying to use this as a appropriate framing, but a business, in order to survive, has to make money. I'm not going to say that it relies solely on profits. I'm not going to say that, but it does rely on a form of cash flow to meet at least its current liabilities.
Okay, let me just stop you right there, and let me point out that the business model of one of the wealthiest individuals right now in this world is Jeff Bezos, and the reason that he has gotten as wealthy as he's gotten is because he's managed to get people to pay him lots of money to lose money absorbing lots of markets. So
that's not actually accurate either, because Amazon. Well, hang on. If you're talking about Amazon actually takes its profits, because it's a company that has decided that in order to innovate, it's going to take its profits and throw it into R&D and to throw it into other business ventures. So, for example, Amazon makes most of its money off of operations and itself. Then it goes into other areas. So I'd be very careful to use that like that.
Right, but that's
Amazon
not.
Hold on. A large amount of its wealth. They spend a large amount of their profits in lobbying and efforts to not have to kick back into the system, and also to have the government to pay them for making profits. The thing is, capitalism is, to me, an unfinished thought. That only, a couple people finished it, but they wanted to make sure nobody else finished that thought, because it's a system that is designed or intended to bolster competition. But what people forget about a competition is, at the end of a competition, what do you got? One winner and a whole bunch of losers.
Real quick, Mr. Parker has his hand up in our personal side chat.
Yes, but Marty did have.
I was gonna get there too. I don't think we quite got to Marty either, so I would like.
I do want to let her jump in here.
You might be muted, Marty.
Yeah, you might be muted. I can't hear you. I don't see the microphone next to her name, so I don't know what to do.
She may not have enabled the microphone in StreamYard.
Yeah,
I don't know how to do that.
You might need to go out and come back in, Marty.
Default mic.
But what I mean by that is that if you allow capitalism to operate as intended, it inherently creates monopolies. That's the end result.
I would disagree.
And not only that, it gives them the amount of power that is given to a company under capitalism is to eliminate competition, to stop the competition. Perfect example of this is, does anybody remember
Amazon?
Wait a second. No, wait.
Billions of dollars suppressing
Leo, please.
small businesses so that they can absorb the share of those markets.
Leo, please.
Calm down.
So what I was gonna say is, there used to be a company called AdLib. They weren't a technology company, but they made amazing audio equipment, right? They made great, some of the best audio equipment for computers at one point in time. But the people that make Sound Blaster, they decided, hey, we do this too, but our competition is beating us. They're making better products. Unfortunately, they're not an electronics manufacturer. They're not in the electronics game, so they're using off-the-shelf parts. Who are they buying those parts from? Oh, seems they're buying them from Motorola. Well, let's go have a conversation with Motorola. Hey, Motorola, what chip are they making? What chip are they using? Oh, they're going to be using this brand new OP3 chip. Well, how about you just say that chip doesn't pass certification? And they held that chip back. They held that chip back from certification until their sound card was ready to hit the market. And then 30 days after their sound card went on sale, they allowed Motorola to sell the chip to AdLib. But they knew that they had already sunk that company. And for 20 years, they kept up the lie that the chip simply did not pass certification. However, when a journalist was investigating it, he received a call from the gentleman at Motorola who was told by Sound Blaster, the company that makes Sound Blaster, that they would make the call of when that chip passed certification.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I would just like to kind of clarify something here. I'm going to try and avoid using this like I get it, evidence is evidence, but like if that's the case, then I can just go and start saying, well, communism is bad because it's a form of socialism.
But there's never been a communism.
Hang on, no, that's a true Scotsman fallacy, and I don't.
No, there's never been a successful communism by the definition of communism.
How about we circle back to Marty? We haven't heard from.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, real quick, I just wanted to make a quick point. First of all, Leo kick ass in that debate, and boy, Steven is hilarious.
Yeah, he is. He's a riot. He's a riot.
He's like, it doesn't matter what fucking country I'm from. I'm like, fuck yeah, get him. But what a lot of people mistake is when they hear socialism, they automatically think communism and like bread lines and like fucking it's gonna tank the whole economy and we're all gonna be. No, dude, not if it's done right. Not if there's like the democratic process, like democratic socialism, which is what I think you might be talking about, Leo. Is that kind of what you're talking about a little bit?
Well, yes, but no. And the reason I add no to that is because socialism, by definition, is democratic. So adding the prefix democratic to it, to me, it's like saying an animal dog or a wooden tree or a tornado twister. But really quickly, I'm gonna do some moderation. Brenton is trying to get in if there's anybody that would be willing to drop to let him in, because I requested him in because he knows more than me on particularly the Catalonia issue. If there would be anybody that would be willing to drop to let him come in, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I would, because I would love to hear from Britton, but I can't.
Somebody did drop, so I just want to throw out there, please, nobody else try to join Britton. If you're still out there, try to join the StreamYard again. It should let you in.
Yep, that spot will be for Britton. I would love to have him on, and I know Mr. Parker wants to go.
Yes.
And there's some points that Simus would like to go. So, yeah, please feel free to get in. I'm going to shut up and be a bad moderator.
I've been wondering what Simus has to say.
Go ahead.
So, I think, like, the whole idea of, like, socialism and, like, how we do that in, like, worker co-ops is, like, what Jim mentioned about, like, you want 80,000 workers voting on everything. That's going to be very inefficient or whatever. I would agree, yes. We don't want, direct democracies, of course. But we would rather have the CEOs of, like, Amazon or whatever get picked and voted by the people who work at Amazon than the shareholders who own millions of dollars. and in a worker co-op, they could vote on issues like where should we put our waste? Should we put it in the local river, or should we properly dispose of it? Because I think that would be a major help by worker co-ops is preventing environmental harm, especially in multiple examples of where many companies have decided to do the cheapest way to dispose of waste, and has caused thousands of local workers to get harmed at their house road, evident in the I think what they're called the Radiant Girls or whatever. They would like lick their tongue and or like lick something as they were
They painted with radon paint, and they would lick their finger. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could have easily been done, stopped by worker co-ops, because they were suppressed. The workers themselves were suppressed from having a voice about that, and even the community themselves in that worker area went against the workers due to the fact that they thought they were lying or whatever.
Well, I think it's important to note that a lot of pollution is really an issue of the tragedy of the commons. Not all of it, because some of it can't be realized in any other way, but I mean, that's not a problem of capitalism. That's actually an absence of capitalism. It's the commons. It's not a failure of socialism either, because it's not. It's just
I would hold on, Mr. Parker. I want to ask him a quick question just so I understand him. When you say the commons, are you referring to like just the common people, the common man?
No, the commons refers to property that is not owned by anyone. Like anybody can use it, anybody can build on it or utilize it, like a river that no one owns. Like anybody can dump into it, anybody can fish from it.
But
or like...
that's not the way it works in this country, because the public lands is owned by everyone. So that's the thing. And then also, wait a second. How is it a failure of the commons and not capitalism, a system that is that encourages profit at all means, right? The capitalist company that DuPont chooses to not put in a filtration system, but instead dump directly into a stream because it is more profitable to do that than to comply with regulations which were put in place by the commons. So how is it a failure of the commons? Because the capitalism bolstered the need for profit by so much that this company felt that it was right to take the profitable choice instead of the choice that was better for the environment around them.
Really quick. I want to let Sphincter respond, but Brenton did say he is backstage. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll look, and somebody must have turned it off. But I was going to say, yeah, it sounded like we had a TV in the background. But yeah, I have to turn. I'll look and bring Brenton in. All right. There we go.
I think all the environmental issues that we currently have is a fault of capitalism at the expense of profits, in terms of how corporations and major businesses try to figure out the best way to make profits. Like the lobbying that happened in I think it was like the late 60s or in the 90s, I forget exactly, of carbon leaded gasoline or whatever. There was like one scientist who was like, yeah, this is like terrible stuff. It's harming everyone. Like kids' teeth are falling out and whatnot.
Claire Patterson versus Robert Kehoe. Yeah.
I think so, yes. But I did want to give Sphincter a chance to respond to what Puff said, and then I think we should head over to Brenton.
Yeah. So like in that respect, because no one owns the commons, then there's no incentive to maintain that. Part of ownership is being able to exclude non-owners. If anyone can use it, there's no incentive to maintain it, because the amount of effort or any kind of risk that you put into developing it or maintaining it is not commensurate with any kind of return on that investment or risk. And that's really the key point of the tragedy of the commons. Now, the fact that it's not a failure of capitalism doesn't mean it's a failure of socialism either, because it's not social ownership either. It's common ownership.
What do you?
But we do. Okay, a couple things.
Hold on. Moderation. I did make a mistake. Simus has been trying to get in for at least 10 minutes, so I think we should give him a chance to share his thoughts. Okay. Then we should go to Brenton.
Okay, I'm kind of with Jim here. Not necessarily on his side, but it's really important, I think, to try and define the terms we're using and what some of them mean. Am I correct, Leo, that you're defining socialism as the workers owning the means of production. Is that right?
I mean, yes, but I would also argue that that's not just how I'm defining socialism.
Sure.
I would argue that is the definition of socialism.
Okay, good. Okay, well, that's fine. However you want to use it, that's what's on the table.
Can I have one quick?
Well, I haven't quite finished.
Oh, sorry.
And then the second thing is, how are you defining capitalism?
I would define capitalism as private ownership over the means of production, distribution, and exchange, generally held by firms that operate on an individualistic basis versus socialist firms that operate on a collective basis.
I don't think that represents capitalism. As
corporations are collectively owned.
However, my immediate reaction to what you're saying, Leo, seems to have some major drawbacks against the capitalism that we do have, certainly in America and in Britain, which is, very few companies are owned by one individual. They may be run by one individual or a group of individuals, but they're very, very rarely owned by one individual. I can't think of many examples. And the second thing is, of course, one of the ways companies expand and regenerate their own business is through leverage of capital, and that is more efficiently done on a public market than it's done by just a small group of people, i.e., the workers, being able to raise capital themselves. So I feel that there is some significant drawbacks to what you're saying your version of socialism is, based over what I see in Europe as being a socialist country, somewhere like France, UK, Germany, which seem to have mixed economies, which seem to work the best for socialism. But obviously, I'm using a different version of socialism there because I'm not saying that the workers themselves should necessarily own the companies, but I would definitely say that they should have the ability to buy into their companies, right? And
I would argue that buying into companies isn't really socialism. At best, you could argue it's like a faux socialism, because in the United States, with companies like Publix and numerous other companies, we have that, but they have no substantial measure of control over what that company is doing. They just maybe make a little extra money because they own shares in it.
Right,
so if the workers don't democratically control the firm, I would argue then it's not socialism.
Well, then you run up against like Jim's problem, which is how can you get 80,000 people to run a company on a day-to-day basis?
The same way that Mondragon is done. Mondragon has 64,000 employees. They've been successful since they've started. And I'm not going to argue that they haven't at times maybe utilized some of the capitalist systems they exist in to aid them. But I would also argue that in a market socialist economy, those same market forces and market incentives would still exist so that things like investment and what have you still take place.
But then that makes it not true socialism. I would respond that's not true socialism. That's not true socialism.
What was that again? I'm sorry.
That's not true socialism then, because
what is
true? And that's what I was talking about earlier. Like we can start pulling apart these different things and saying, well, that's not true socialism, or that's not true capitalism, or crony capitalism isn't true capitalism. I'm not going to go down that route.
Jim,
wait a second. Why?
Jim, do you think that socialism precludes profit?
Hold on. Puff jumped in here. I want to give Puff a chance, but then after Puff, I do want to jump.
My question is this: why are the critics of socialism starting from the completely bonkers position that socialism doesn't have markets as well?
I never said that either.
Every system is a market-based system. Every single system.
No,
there's nothing special about capitalism in terms of it being a market system. Because guess what? Every system is a market system. I'll let Breton carry after me. But every system is a market system. It's just how do you set that market up?
All right. Now we're gonna go to Breton because he's been waiting here for almost 10 minutes. I want to give him an opportunity to jump in here.
Thanks, guys. I don't want to throw like a complete wrench into it. Jesus, that debate gave me ulcers.
I'm sorry if I said anything that was really dumb.
No, that's all right. There was a lot of dumb stuff said in that debate. So for those of you who don't know me, I've done a number of debates on the channel. Usually I talk about socialism, communism, anarchism, and Buddhism. But I'm also the author of a film which is about to come out as a comic series about the life of anarchist Buenaventura Durruti, who is basically the anarchist Che Guevara. And as a result of writing this film and also being involved in the anarchist movement in the United States, especially via Occupy Wall Street, I have read a lot into Spanish history. And there was a number of really, really ignorant things said by like just about everybody in that debate. And
Me?
Yeah, but here's the thing. You actually like admitted that you didn't know about it. And it's one of the more frustrating things that you'll hear because anarchist Catalonia is one of the bright, shining examples of actual, real socialism functioning and working wonderfully in practice. Did it work longer than the Spanish Civil War? No, because they were violently suppressed by the USSR, and this was the thing that CJ got wrong. So it's a very complicated situation. I'm going to recommend what people want to do is you want to go out. There's a couple books you want to look at. You want to look at Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell. There is there's a 9-part series on my channel where we go chapter by chapter through that book. That is George Orwell accounting Fighting with the POUM, which is a Trotskyist left Marxist organization, though he says he would have preferred to have joined the anarchists had he understood the situation better. It's his personal on the ground. It's like the whole reason he wrote Animal Farm, the whole reason he wrote 1984 is because he lived through those purges of the Trotskyist and anarchist organizations after the May Days of 1937. So, like, right off the bat, check that out. Also, Abel Paz. Again, Abel Paz was about 15 years old. He fought in the revolution, fought against Franco. You really want to read his biography of Durruti. And if you want something that's like more from like a standard liberal historian, check out Adam Hochschild's Spain in Our Hearts. It is an excellent book. But one of the key things that I really wanted to make sure that we got across here is that when Spain's military went fascist in the north, the defense was taken up by the anarchists, the Cientify, who carried out a civilians' war against the fascists and actually defeated them for the only time in recorded history. I'm talking farmers and factory workers armed with homemade bombs and antique rifles left over from World War I defeated a modern mechanized army backed by Hitler and Mussolini, backed by the Condor Legion.
Poggers.
And fascist Italy.
I thought Catalonia fell at the Battle of Ebro, where they definitely got outgunned because.
That was after they were suppressed. Now, yes, the anarchists were eventually stopped, and the problem was not that their system didn't work. In fact, if you watch, there's a great documentary on it called Living Utopia. It's totally free on YouTube. Just Google it, you'll find it. What happened was that the only country that would aid Spain was the USSR. Everyone else turned their backs on them. And while fascist Italy and fascist Germany were helping Franco. So as a result of that, what happened was that the Stalinists, who were a relatively minor political party at the time, took control of the Spanish Republican government. During the May days of
I did not know that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. And Stalin stole all the gold in the Bank of Spain in return for his help, and then kind of gave half-hearted help. He was more or less just testing his weapons because he figured he was going to be fighting Germany and Italy soon. So he wanted just test the waters there. Anyway, they take all the gold from the Bank of Spain, and what they wound up doing was, in the name of like military order, they went in and they attacked their own allies, which were the anarchists and the left Marxist units who were Marxists but not Stalinists. They suppressed them. They would have lost, except the anarchists left their troops directly on the border. Because if they had recalled their anarchist militias, which had defeated the fascists in the north, they'd recalled them to fight the communists, that just leaves the door open for Franco. So they said it's more important to defeat the fascists, and they essentially allowed themselves to be defeated by the Stalinists. And then the Stalinists then went on to lose the war against the fascists, partially because they were idiots and they couldn't unify, and partially because Stalin wasn't really interested in that. I think he just wanted the gold and wanted to test his weapons and was really afraid of what a USSR-controlled Spain would do to the other liberal powers, because pretty much everyone was against the USSR. But it's really important that people look into this period of history, because we have very good records on it. It's fascinating, and the anarcho-syndicalist system that was set up honestly outperformed the previous capitalist system by leaps and bounds, and only started to have problems with, like, for instance, shortages when Stalin took over and they reinstituted private property. That was suddenly when the black market took off, for instance, and then eventually it collapsed. So yeah, and I don't expect everybody to know that stuff. Again, I've spent years and years reading into this, and I'm a total nerd for it. But like, it's a good thing to have, because what they'll say is because the fascists won in Spain, therefore anarchism doesn't work and socialism doesn't work.
No,
it's simply not the case.
I would agree that that's a premature conclusion.
Hold on. Are you done, Brenton?
Yeah.
Okay,
thank you for
so
letting me go on like that.
Yeah, 100%. And I appreciate you coming in. I wanted you to come in because I admitted, there's like literally one or two like just small articles I read on this. Didn't know if I could trust the sources, so I appreciate you coming in. I did want to go to Jeff, then I want to go to Simos, then Jim, then Sphincter.
And welcome, Flow State. You're the walking dumpster fires here, so we should have some fun.
No fires today. I'm doing my chill thing.
All right, we'll see.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Wait, talking to me?
Yeah, you're the only Jeff in here, as far as I know.
Yeah, you did have your hand up a while back, Jeff.
I did, but it's moved on since then. I'm not sure what's going on right now. The conversation has moved on before that, so I'll wait on that.
Simon, anything you want to say?
Well, just since we've gone back to the debate previous rather than the topics we were on, I'll let Jim get back to that in a second. But I also wanted to say that Maddox was wrong about the UK not having a private healthcare system. We do indeed have a private healthcare system. It's alive and well, and the government put money behind it. It didn't regulate it to try and restrict it at all. No, in fact, the government started to put money into building hospitals and clinics for the private healthcare system, and then levied rents from them for those buildings, etc. So, it's not true what Maddox was saying about the government trying not to have a private healthcare system in this country. It was heavily encouraged under. First Thatcher, of course, started the idea, and then every government since has just expanded it. And I would say it's probably somewhere in the region of 40% of our health now performed by private clinics. And of course, the reason we could close hospitals, National Health Service hospitals, is because we then bought private resources through the National Health Service for the general public, who then get it free at private hospitals. So the system is completely, is nothing like you said it was. And I just wanted to say that about the debate. He was completely wrong on that. Anyway, Jim, if you want to return to the debate we were having, please go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things there. So I'm just going to put something in the chat just because there's a lot of different topics that we're kind of approaching on. So, we're talking about individual wealth, profit versus value, and what to do with profit, markets properly mixed versus arguing on the fringes, and how do we attribute socialism or capitalism to avoid no true Scotsman fallacies, right? And so it's kind of my thing here. I'm trying not to go to the fringes as often because I think all markets are kind of mixed in some regard. Like the U.S. market is, I would say, it leans towards capitalism with some socialism in it because it protects its workers at some level and it protects its consumers. That's what the fundamental purpose of regulation in this regard is. So there's that. Then you also have to kind of look at what is the appropriate mix. And if you just use straw man of all of these things all the time, we're going to get nowhere. We're just to argue from the fringes. It's just going to be a shit show.
But, okay, so my thing is, the problem I have is the concept of a true socialism or a true capitalism, because There's been countless over the last couple hundred years. There's been countless attempts at capitalism to start a capitalism, right? That would be successful, and several of them failed. Many of them failed, and one system ended up succeeding, right? One system. Well,
okay, but I don't disclaim it and say it's not true capitalism. I don't disclaim crony capitalism and say it's not true capitalism. That's the thing. And that I would pose is what makes socialism so perfect.
But what separates? Wait a second. What separates crony capitalism from regular capitalism?
No, I'm not going to back down. Like, what makes socialism so uncorruptible? Because I guarantee you,
it's not. What I'm saying is, what's the difference between crony capitalism and capitalism?
The Federal Reserve System.
The Federal Reserve System existed before crony capitalism did.
No, I mean, I wouldn't even go that far. But I would say crony capitalism or crony aspects of capitalism are going to be part of the system.
So wait a second. So in capitalism, where you use your profits to gain advantage in the system or in the market and shut out your competition, that's capitalism. So the crony aspect of it doesn't apply. Whether you spend your wait a second. I'm not gonna back down either. Whether you spend your profits, whether you spend your profits changing the laws or lobbying to get rid of regulations in your industry or to eliminate your tax burden, or you use your money to research new products, to research new trends, to produce ad campaigns that drive customers towards your business. That's your choice in capitalism, right? So there's no difference between using that money to do things that other people don't find morally or ethically acceptable, to do things that are other people might find morally or ethically acceptable. It's a system that encourages both in equal measure.
Moderation. Jim, I'm gonna let you go. Hold on. I'm gonna let Jim go, but then after that, I want Sphincter to jump in, and then Flow State, since he's been sitting there, and I'm sure he's got some stuff to say. So go ahead, Jim.
I mean, you're ignoring a bunch of things in order to kind of push your perspective in this agenda versus looking at it the whole thing. Like that, again, we come back to this notion of crony capitalism. I'm not going to sit here and say that crony capitalism doesn't exist in the capitalist system. The reason why is because people are going to be self-interested. The same thing is going to occur in socialism at some level. There's going to be some form of crony, we'll call it crony socialism, and you can see how quickly this can go on either side. I just think it's a ridiculous argument to make.
Okay, who's next?
Sphincter is next.
So my problem with many of the arguments regarding capitalism versus crony capitalism is that many of the failures of capitalism, and markets and capitalism do have failures, is often usually actually a failure of government. Sometimes it's a failure of government to intervene. Sometimes it's a failure of government to not intervene. Whereby, so crony capitalism is essentially regulatory capture is a function of regulatory power. The more regulatory power there is, the greater the incentive to capture it. The more centralized it is, the easier it is to capture. So when you create this enormous incentive, anyone who has the means is going to take that on. We should be disincentivizing that. Because often how regulatory capture manifests is not removing regulations, it's increasing them. Because that keeps out their competition. Larger corporations are able to comply with regulations with a lower total burden administratively than smaller ones.
Lower cost of value.
Yeah. And so socialism is not there's nothing unique about socialism or capitalism that makes it inherent to one or the other. It's just when you create this incentive. So that the solution would be to either reduce that power or at least diffuse it. You can diffuse it from an organizational level, like at more lower state levels, or you can do what a lot of European countries you see, where they have more legislators per capita. So it's much harder to capture the loyalty of a given legislator because it's going to cost just as much, but that vote doesn't go as far.
Valid point.
And it's not just that they have more legislators per capita, but their parliamentary system creates more turnover. So you can't even establish a kind of legacy of cronyism either. And many of those countries either lack limitations on either campaign funding or spending. Finland has a lack of either, much like the US. But we don't see as much corruption, I think, because of that. They have more local governance. They have more legislators per capita. So it's not something inherent to capitalism. When I often hear the idea that it's a late stage capitalism, when in reality it's really just the state corrupting the process. It's kind of like, I don't even have a good word for it. Also the state gets kind of a plausible deniability because there are market failures that occur within a capitalist situation where the public generally is like,
on average they happen every 4 to 7 years.
What's it? What do you mean?
A serious economic downturn. It's a system. It's a average that's bared out through capitalism for the last about 200 years.
Well, I don't think that's specific about capitalism. The state is so involved; it distorts all sorts of signaling mechanism.
Wait a second. Why is the state this big boogeyman? Because it seems to be that the state, the capitalist or private entities they always try to compare themselves to the efficiency or the profitability of the government. And I don't understand why you would want your government that provides services to the people to be profitable, because then they have to draw those profits from the people that they're serving. It's kind of counterintuitive.
It is counterintuitive. I agree there, but I think at the same time, thinking that simply doing basically playing accountant, where if there's profits, that's less revenue available for actual services. But it's important to remember that profit incentive also creates an avenue for having more revenue overall.
But private capital, but private capital leans on government services to make themselves profitable.
But whose fault is that?
It's not anybody. So it's the fault.
What I mean is that this is another
why is it a fault? Like why would it not? Why is it have to be someone else's fault? This makes no sense to say, it's your fault that you didn't set up these rules. No. And then you brought up because when you brought up Europe, right? They have far stricter. They have far stricter, far more far-reaching market controls and much more regulation than we have in America.
That's debatable. It depends on you have to get on the.
Are you serious? Go try to make any product in Europe.
All right.
Watch the regulations you have to go through.
Let's just for one, that's more the EU and not simply individual countries. But it's also important to know that something like price controls, many European countries don't have a statutory national minimum wage, but they still have similar wage levels because they have more unions, and their union structure in Europe is more amenable to having unions, unlike in the U.S. where you essentially have a handful of unions. A handful of unions do just as much lobbying as corporations and kind of hamstring any other union from getting a foothold. So there are unions that control entire industries, and then there are other unions that are essentially toothless.
I did want to jump in here really quick. That is 100% true. In many European Union countries, they don't have a minimum wage law because they have unions, and unions do lobby. But what I would argue is we need to look at who unions lobby on the behalf of. Are they lobbying on the behalf of private? So, what I would say is private bourgeois capitalists to increase their profit margins, or are they lobbying on the behalf of the proletariat to ensure that those individuals are sharing in an equitable amount of the profit gained from their labor? And I want to let Sphincter provide a quick rejoinder, and then I do want to go to flow state.
The answer to that question will depend on the country. In the U.S., it's more about not really the workers so much as the union people, the people who run the union itself. Whereas in Europe, it seems, so unions are enormously corrupt in the U.S., particularly public sector unions. So I have no problem with unions in principle, but the way unions are structured in the U.S. has led to crony unionism, I guess. I don't have a better term for it.
It's toxic. It's toxic. But flow state, go ahead and add your thoughts.
He actually covered a lot of what I was going to say. I guess I was mostly going to remind people that capitalism is really based on the principle of voluntary transactions at its heart. So at its heart, it respects the individual's autonomy over the group or the group's representative is how it normally pans out.
Remember,
But,
folks, you voluntarily have the choice to either work at a job and earn money or starve and die. It's your choice. It's voluntarily made every day. Don't worry.
Let's let Flow State finish his point.
Yeah.
That is a fascinating choice. You have the freedom to die.
Guys, Flow State, go ahead.
So the fuck, I lost my train of thought. Oh, nice job, Puff.
Voluntary trade.
Well, I just want to take a moment and thank Leo for taking over control. Leo has been here long enough. Puff has been here long enough. If I don't have John, I don't have moderation. So thank you, Leo. Wanted to put that in.
I'm trying to take after John, because he's just a very good moderator.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, he is.
when we're finished, I'd like to
I remember what I was going to say.
When we finished, I'd just like to bring Leo back into the actual debate. So after Flow State and whoever else, please give me a little go. I've got another question.
Yes, you can go after Flow State. And then after Simus, I want Sunflower to add his thoughts.
I'll go Sunflower.
Really, what is the problem in any economic system that's getting exploited is power. It's all about power, and as it plays out in the real world, maybe not academically, but the way that socialist or Marxist movements play out is they work to centralize authority really quickly in the name of decentralizing it, but it ends up working the other way. So that's a faster system to corrupt.
I would agree slightly that the rapid formation of authority in some countries, say like, what happened in 1917's revolution in Russia, was they didn't have any plan. There was no how to do how to make a commune work properly. So they were like running on whatever, and like in all countries they all have different conditions and how they form their revolutions. Like in Cuba, and then certain communes that pop up. I don't entirely like market socialism due to the fact that it allows some markets, but like the whole idea of letting workers have a choice in the matter of what happens in some industries is more favorable in the fact that it actually respects bodily autonomy in the fact that it gives them the ability to partake in the industry more than it would in a capitalist society focus on profitable means via giving like certain wages and not really caring about what workers exactly hold or like want exactly.
Okay, so really quickly, I haven't contributed anything, so give me about 30 seconds, and then I want to go to Simus, and then I want to go to Sunflower. I did want to answer a question that Jim posted in the private chat here. You still can't escape death and taxes. I would agree with that. Would taxes be higher in socialism? I would argue that in a properly operating socialist system, the likes of which I would advocate for, they would be lower, given that most people would have a better standard of living through the establishment of worker cooperatives. We would see a drastic drop in the amount of people depending on social programs, and we would potentially even see an elimination of the minimum wage and numerous other things like that, which I would argue would reduce the amount of taxes that individuals need to pay into the government system. But I would also argue that the amount of taxes that we pay doesn't honestly depend entirely on the economic system that we have structured. It depends on our government. So if we want to lower taxes, I would argue that yes, we need to provide an incentive for people to not depend on programs funded through taxes. But on top of that, we need to ensure that the government isn't raising taxes for, like, say, an overbloated military budget or corporate subsidies, things I would argue would potentially be abolished in a market socialist system. But I do want to throw the mic to Simus.
Oh, okay, I'll go real quick. What you said earlier about the EU not having national minimum wage, that isn't true. The EU recommends all member countries have a national minimum wage. Of course, that's not saying that it's a living minimum wage, and that is obviously a separate point. But of course, in order to call something a minimum wage, one would expect for the governments to try and back some kind of, or at least the government's trying to get into power to back some kind of living minimum wage rather than just some arbitrary figure which they realised that all companies will pay. So there is that side of it. The second side of it was really a question to you, which is, in order for companies to survive in the long term, they occasionally are going to have to leverage large sums of money from markets in order to update equipment, etc., for which they will then make future profits. They certainly can't do it from previous profits. All right, so I don't see how that is done in a socialist system. And if you could just give me some explanation under your model, how a company would be able to do that and then survive in the long term rather than go through a cycle of boom bust.
I don't see how worker cooperatives couldn't invest in equipment, because the data that I have looked at has showed that they are capable of investing in updated equipment.
Right, but they can't do that from profits, right?
They do
yeah.
from profits from the data that I have seen.
That's
Like
the
the
entire
idea
point
that
of a
worker cooperatives are not like that, their profits are drastically reduced over traditional firms, does not seem to be supported by the academic literature. And
why aren't they around?
Actual legitimate academic literature.
Then why aren't they found then? Why don't they naturally form?
They do.
Some
The-
do,
the
but
re-
there's some
a lot of the
lobbying
reasons
against
that you don't see a lot of worker cooperatives dominating the market is because it isn't beneficial to.
Also, they're not.
I didn't finish. It isn't
Sorry.
beneficial to the expansion of the wealth and power of a small amount of people. Nobody's going to want to start a company trying to make as much money for themselves if they realize that they're going to have to equitably share. And I want to stress the word equitably over equally, because there is a difference. If they have to equitably share the wealth amongst all of the workers.
If labor can organize to demand higher wages, then they can organize to spin off on their own, you would think.
But they can't. They're not legally recognized as of now.
Like, if you look at Uber, they're not even considered, I think, as employees. So that's why they don't have certain
Yeah, no,
rights.
hang on. Again, one of the things that I'd mentioned when this conversation started was that some of these business organizations are recognized by the state, and the idea that somebody is forming an LLC or a corporation, S corp or whatever, is that they're forming a business entity with the state government. That was one of the things that they were actually doing. So one of the things that's actually happening here in this particular case, those particular organizations, these co-op organizations, are not recognized as legal organizations in most states. So yes, they don't really get off the ground.
And a lot of that has to do with lobbying by traditional business firms to suppress this model, because they know that if it takes hold, it could potentially threaten the profits that are absorbed by the executives and the shareholders.
I don't believe
that are
that
then
that's
utilized to line their pockets.
I don't believe
I mean, we can see this
true.
already today. Why do you think that companies like Dow AgroSciences and DuPont joined? Do you think that it was because it was economically beneficial, or do you think it was a means of reducing competition in the markets under the, or rather as a result of market power consolidation, where firms
consolidating power.
consolidate to absorb market power, reduce competition, which in turn allows them to raise prices? The less options,
Right, but nobody's lobbying against
to
this
win a
oppressive business model.
in turn means that those same businesses can charge you more because you have less options of where to go.
But Leo, have you ever owned a business though?
Yeah, exactly. I've never owned a business. I'm just a little bitch-made soy boy socialist. I don't know.
Nobody's lobbying to suppress these businesses. Like Anheuser-Busch is a great example. They want small businesses to start up.
Amazon is directly lobbied for government favor, for favor from the government that benefits them.
Absolutely.
At the disincentive of smaller firms. Barnes & Noble has seen a drastic drop in their profits because of Amazon. This is demonstrable. How Amazon grew to the size that they are now is a direct result of their capture of that market through predatory practices that are inherent to capitalism, because
Isn't that kind of like saying Netflix took away from Blockbuster, though? I mean, market shift.
I have a question.
Markets can't shift. There's a difference between a market shifting and some firm actually engaging in predatory practices to directly capture that
How
market.
do you define predatory practices?
Predatory practices like
Capitalism.
rent-seeking, artificial stock value inflation, market power consolidation, all of these things.
Actually,
from firms in the United States.
Market power consolidation is actually one of the most commonly used weapons of economic warfare in America.
100%.
And it simply
100%.
consists of this: if you can afford to buy your competition out, then you don't have to compete with them because you can buy them, fire all their employees, sell or wreck the building, and now you control an even greater portion of the market. Or you can just buy their factory, buy their business, put your stuff on the outside, and now it's another DuPont factory.
Okay, but before anybody goes in, and I don't want to like stomp on anybody's feet, but I do want Sunflower to give some thoughts because he's been in here for almost 10 minutes and hasn't said anything. So go ahead, Sunflower. And then after Sunflower, Jeff can go, then Mr. Parker, then I want to go to Jim because I think Jim's been trying to get in for a while.
Oh, is it my turn?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I mean, I think everyone's making really good points, which is why I'm here mostly to listen. If someone else is trying to get in, I'll even consider dropping. But I have one overarching kind of burning question that always comes up in my mind during these debates, and that is just how do you or do you even want to have some sort of meritocracy in a socialist system? Like, how do you go about rewarding the people that are just work harder or have better ideas?
You can still have that in this.
Yes.
So are you talking about the labor theory of value?
Just really quickly before Jeff goes, I would argue that a market socialist system is probably more meritocratic than a capitalist system because those who have demonstrated their ability to understand the industry and to act in a manner that benefits the company as a whole, that benefits everybody that's a part of it, is more likely to be voted into a position of management or supervisory or essentially an executive position by the workers. You're more likely to see that under a market socialist system than a capitalist system where oftentimes, and I know this, not just at smaller firms, but at larger firms, you tend to see this playing favorites idea where, well, you might not necessarily be the best in your position, but I'm going to put you in it because I like you.
Well, that's just the Peter principle, which is just another problem entirely.
That's not exactly what he's talking about. The Peter principle is slightly different.
But my question is more like, okay, let's say that you have some sort of co-op, but it's like a sort of like an engineering innovative tech thing, and there's one guy that's like, let's just say he's sort of resembles like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, and he quickly rises to the top of his little co-op firm, but then he's so good that everyone just basically elects for him to be as powerful and in control as those guys are respectively in their capitalist American models. Like, I just feel like
good question.
I would argue that a market socialist system in the form of worker cooperatives actually disincentivizes like this idea that somebody could rise to a point of complete and utter autocratic control, because whether you are in favor or against capitalism is by definition autocratic. The vast majority of people that work at firms have absolutely no say in how the firm operates. They have absolutely no control over their employment or how they're going to receive benefits, whether it's wages, healthcare, all that stuff from a company. Capitalism is inherently autocratic. Market socialism fixes that problem.
Well, what's stopping people, the voters or the workers, from picking someone that just benefits the workers more than the company in a sustainable fashion?
But I would argue that in a
sustainability of the company.
Yes, I would argue in a market socialist system that the long-term sustainability, the longevity of the country, or the company in a sustainable and efficient manner is what's generally going to benefit workers. And the vast majority of data, not even just from market worker cooperative seats demonstrate. Like if we look at just capitalist systems, longevity of a company. Long term, and I want to emphasize that long-term productivity, long-term profitability, long-term efficiency generally is a result of vastly more people than just the executives or the shareholders benefiting from the labor, from the the wealth that is generated by the labor of the people who aren't executives or shareholders. So I would argue that in such a system, workers are going to vote for people who tend to benefit them more, and those workers benefiting is what contributes to the longevity of these firms. And I would argue, I think I can cite data, academic literature that substantiates that point.
Cited an example.
Well, wait, but my question is just like, what if there's a guy at your co-op and he's like, oh, like, let me like, if you just show me your like your pay and your hours and your vacation time, let me like sort it all out. I'll give you the best plan on how to you know, select which days you're off and all that. And then people realize when they let this guy do this that they're just they earn more money, they're happier, and they like and so everyone just says, okay, we'll let this guy take care of all of our stuff because he does a better job than we even can do for ourselves.
That's just not how they operate. That's
not even how humans operate.
Exactly. Worker cooperatives are not autocratic. We don't just delegate all of the power to one person. Capitalist firms don't even really work that way. Like Jeff Bezos does very, very little in terms of the day-to-day operations, even at a higher level of Amazon. I think everybody here would agree with that. So why is he worth literally hundreds of billions of dollars, and his workers are struggling to make ends meet when their labor is what contributes to the value that Jeff Bezos then absorbs for himself?
Those Amazon warehouse workers are making ends meet. They're making the end of their urinary tract meet that Gatorade bottle.
But I'm not.
That's true.
I'm not.
But I want to point something out. I want to read a quote, and I'd be interested in any of the individuals here that are still in the chat that are pro-capitalism. I would like, if any of you know where this quote came from, please let me know.
Let Jeff give his quote, and then after that, I want to let Jim jump in here because I think he's got a lot to say.
So here's the quote. Please let me know if you know who said this, made the statement. There is one rule for the industrialists, and that is make the best quality goods possible at the lowest cost possible, paying the highest wages possible. Who said that?
Ford.
I'm guessing Ford. But here's the thing about Ford. It says highest wages possible, not, which means that if it's the lowest price possible and the highest wage possible, there's still a cap on what the wages are. There's still a cap on the value of that labor that's being sold by the worker.
You guys missed the first part.
Which part?
There's one rule for the industrialist.
Okay.
The kinds of consumerism, the kinds of capitalism that you guys are talking about right now, right? There's industrial capitalism and there's finance capitalism. The kind of capitalism that's happening in the United States, and I would argue in the UK, most of the world around us, is finance capitalism. And it's not based on industrial capitalism. These rules, that this basic idea, this little maxim that Henry Ford put forward, that's based on industrial capitalism. And it's based on making stuff and getting people to buy that crap.
Yeah,
that's
making
not
stuff and paying the people who make it enough to be capable of purchasing that same product. Otherwise, how are you going to make like Henry Ford said that he was asked by almost every other major industrialist of the time, why are you paying your workers $5 an hour? Obviously, we're talking like, you know, the teens, early 20s. $5 an hour was a lot of money to be making an hour back then. He was asked, why are you paying this much? And he said, well, what's the point of making cars if the people that I hire to make them can't
drive them?
I mean,
well, the problem with that is that what's often overlooked in that story for Henry Ford was that he fired all of his low-skilled mechanics and got all the best mechanics in Detroit. So that high wage was great for those high-skilled mechanics, but the low-skilled mechanics, or the ones that were just unreliable, they got screwed because now they couldn't work for Ford anymore because he's only going to pay. He's only going to. He's not going to hire people.
Okay. Look. Here's the problem with this idea. Like the idea here isn't that he didn't screw over some of the people that he employed. This is the advice that he's giving to industrialists.
Okay.
This is not the advice that's being given by financial capitalists. This is not what they would tell people. You pay workers the least amount of money possible to maximize your profit. That's how finance capitalism works, not how industrial capitalism works. There has been a sea change in how capitalism works.
It works
in the United States and the world. And hang on, guys. Anytime we end up having these discussions about whether or not capitalism versus socialism or any of this other bullshit happens, people act like capitalism is not a dynamic beast, and it certainly fucking is. When this stuff happened, this was different. You could run capitalism this way, but now the way that it's being run and this whole sort of end of history crap that Francis Fukuyama predicts, it's based on finance capitalism. It's based on speculative finance capitalism. That's how things work today. And that shit is not maintainable. It is not sustainable.
No, it's not.
You are going to end up getting, you are going to get what you get right now. Lots of revolution, lots of rebellion, lots of revolt.
Firms buy up the market share, suppress their workers, squeeze as much of a profit out of them.
People are going to run a fucking riot
to
because
Jefferson's,
that shit doesn't work.
To Jefferson's point real quick, I've stayed quiet because this has been a fascinating conversation, and at the end I'm going to give you all props because we got here tonight. What you didn't get, what Leo wasn't able to get during the debate was actual decent conversation because the interlocutors know their shit. I want to commend the capitalists.
Mad Dux was
but
not.
I am a socialist not because I know the theory like Leo, or I can sit here and spit finance like Jefferson can. I'm a fucking socialist because I've been a worker my whole life, and I've seen what it has done for me, which is absolutely nothing. So so I'm a different kind of socialist, and that's just kind of going to what Jefferson is pointing out here is the capitalism that we live in now is producing more and more people like me, and that's going to be good for the future of this country, I believe.
Yeah. So, and in terms of like what any of these guys, any of you guys that are out there like trying to defend these kinds of systems because you think like you can invest your way through problems or any of this other kind of stuff, you need to keep in mind what happened with the Robin Hood stuff. Any of that stuff can change over time. Any of this stuff.
Here.
It's my soda.
Okay.
Cherry Coke tonight.
My issue with most of this kind of stuff, when people talk about this kind of crap, is that like I don't have a problem with capitalism if capitalism is being defined by this idea of people being able to trade or do business or sell their goods or any of this other kind of stuff, because that's a non sequitur. That's a false argument. That's not what's happening. Capitalism is about people being able to accumulate either the means of production or property or whatever at a rate, and then pass it on to their kids at a point. And that's what Thomas Piketty argues, where you end up having people that are inheriting aspects of wealth that the vast majority of individuals in a society will never have access to. And as long as those people can convert those things into kind of speculative finance, they'll find ways to make profit off of them, regardless of whether or not the vast majority of people have the ability to even continue to make means meet for themselves. That's a real problem. And if we don't deal with that, here's the problem. If you don't deal with that, capitalism eats itself. It loses to itself.
I would agree that the current system, which is highly distorted, in part because of corruption in the state, and part of just simple fraud and stuff that happens in the current structure, that is unsustainable. But that's not really what proponents of capitalism are arguing. They're arguing more for something that is closer to a freer market where there are fewer interventions.
Market, hang on. That market is already presupposed by a state that I've already established that. If you've got an LLC or a partnership or any of that other kind of stuff, it's being established by a fucking government organization already.
Right.
None of this stuff exists in some kind of libertarian free. This kind of stuff that happens, whatever this kind of crap ass idea is, you guys are guzzling a weird ass libertarian view where you can exist in a world that just exists on the idea where people buy and sell and trade things, and there's no government necessary, and then there's a government that happens, and oh my God, we need to get rid of that government entirely.
No.
The kind of capital. Hang on. The kind of capitalism that you are subsisting on absolutely requires a government in order to keep you in business. It absolutely requires that. And the fact that you don't acknowledge it means that you are so far up your own ass in your ideology that you don't even realize the necessity of the imprimatur that's being provided by the government that is giving you license to conduct business.
All right,
Jefferson
so
dropping straight knowledge. Hold on.
well,
Moderation,
no, I can tell you that
moderation. Quick rejoinder from Sphincter. Then I gotta get to Jim. Jim, I know
Jim has been waiting, and Flow State has had his hand up as well. So
yeah, so I want to get to Jim, then Flow State, and then we'll let Puff give a couple minutes to respond to everything that he's heard. Go ahead.
I'm not arguing for the abolishment of government. Obviously, whatever form of ownership that you have, you need some sort of authority, and that authority often manifests as government. You can go with the anarchist argument that you could do it without government, but there is a paradox there. But whatever authority you recognize as an anarchist effectively becomes the government. I'm not arguing about that. I'm arguing about everything that the state goes beyond simply establishing and recognizing private property as is. Where you have various regulations that just prevent market entry or distort the value of things, either the supply or demand of it. Like there's a lot more to the state other than that. So arguing against particular overreaches of the state is not arguing against the state in of itself. But as for Thomas Piketty, as I understand it, and it's been a while since I looked at it, my problem with Thomas Piketty's argument is that one, he cherry-picked his time periods, and two, he didn't account for devaluation of capital. So there are a number of issues that regard. But at the same time, inequality in of itself is not a problem. Absolute poverty is. If you look at absolute poverty, it occurs independently of inequality. Singapore has more inequality than even the U.S., but it has few, if any, of the problems associated with inequality, which tells us that inequality may be a symptom of the problem. In the U.S., I would argue, would be a grossly corrupted system, which is tied to both capitalists as well as unions, and it's a big fucking mess when it comes down to it.
Do you understand what kind of social programs are available to the citizens of Singapore?
Not as much as you think. But
okay, so I've known a few people that have come from Singapore. I went to school with them. Those individuals, Singapore is, for the most part, a very business-friendly institution, and they tend to be, as far as like getting registered as a business in that country, very lax, right? In terms of like, it's very simple to get yourself started off in that realm. They also have extremely generous social benefits programs, and the entire administration of that government is very top-down heavy.
They also have extremely heavy taxing too.
Actually, they don't have heavy taxing. They do have.
Oh, yes, they do. Because just to let's just go in the case of how much do you think it costs? Wait, how much do you think it costs to buy a Honda Civic there?
I don't know. So just
3 times the cost it costs, because you have to pay $30,000 for the car, $30,000 for your permission permit to drive the vehicle, and then $30,000 for your import and excise fees.
At the time that I was the friends that I knew from Singapore, and this would have been in the early aughts. If you wanted to buy a BMW, let's say, right, and it was $30,000 or $40,000 in the United States, it was $400,000 to $500,000 in Singapore. That's how much the tariffs were on.
And if you get a single hole in your muffler, you cannot use any muffler or any part on that vehicle that does not come from the manufacturer from Germany.
Yes.
I'm not arguing it all be like Singapore. I just simply was pointing out that Singapore shows that inequality is not in of itself an problem. And Singapore's tax revenue is 13% of its GDP compared to the U.S.
But Singapore also has the highest.
My guy.
Hold on.
I have to away from this because Jim needs to go, and flow needs to go. So
yeah, but I haven't really chimed in here. I did want to say tax revenues are going to be significantly higher in the U.S. compared to a country like Singapore, simply because we have a significantly larger population, and on top of that, we have the single largest and most robust economy on the planet. Our taxes should be higher, significantly higher than they are in other countries, because we have the ability to pay them. A lot of people say, but we don't, and I would say, in some senses, you're correct, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that people are not paid what they should be paid in this country. That's why the minimum wage in the vast majority of other industrialized countries is $3 to $5 higher than what it is here. But yes, Flow State, and then Jim.
A couple things real quick on the minimum wage point, since you just mentioned it. I want to point out that Facebook, Target, Costco, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan, and Google are all have all announced their support for a $15 an hour minimum wage, which goes to show you who these sort of things are helping, and it's not the workers that they're supposed to help.
Well,
to Jefferson,
$15 isn't a living wage, but it would be a start.
I mean,
for a larger company, that makes sense.
They all work the same way, though, and
no, they don't.
They don't.
It's a little new. It's nuanced. I would say it's nuanced.
It's not nuanced. The bigger the company, the more they can absorb that labor blow.
Yeah, I agree with you exactly.
I agree.
I don't know.
Do they absorb? Like, so what I love is
absolutely
say that people shouldn't, that these companies shouldn't pay $15 an hour minimum wage, but the CEO of the company can make $27 million and nobody bitches about that.
Well, that's the problem.
No. Quick question, and I asked this as a genuine, sincere question. What did the CEO do to earn? And I want to stress that word. And it's, hold on. And it's actual meaning. What did the CEO do to earn tens of millions of dollars? He's not running the fryer.
If $15 an hour minimum wage passes, he's going to earn a way bigger spread.
In what way?
How?
No. I'm genuinely curious to hear Flow States, and I'm not even saying that he's wrong.
I'm not supporting that income difference. What I'm saying is that this solution is going to make the problem worse. This isn't a solution.
In what ways? Like, can you provide some? And I'm not even saying that you're wrong, but I am genuinely curious.
The problem of capitalism, right?
Flow State, an example for Flow State is in 2005, Walmart and Costco lobbied for the minimum wage to be increased to $7.25 an hour. They both had starting wages much higher than that, and they know full well that much of their local competition couldn't pay that, and that's why they lobbied for it. And it wasn't just Walmart; it was Costco too. And suddenly their market share increased shortly afterward.
Of course, that's called market power consolidation, and it is
by lobbying for a higher minimum wage.
Businesses
the outcome. Why would you support
their employees not a living wage? Should we be doing that?
Because the value of anything, labor included, is not based solely on the demands of those selling it. The vast majority of minimum wage workers are secondary or tertiary household earners. The average household income of a household with at least one minimum wage worker is around $41,000 a year, which is more than
not enough.
Maybe it's not enough, but it's more than 2 full-time minimum wage workers, which means that they are a secondary earner. It also depends on what the composition of that household is. Is it 2 people? Is it 1 person? Well, it's probably not 1 person, but the point is that you are not more productive, you're not more valuable as an employee simply because someone decreed that your labor should be sold at a higher point. If your labor isn't worth that much, you now are not allowed to sell your labor at all. And if you look at patterns regarding unemployment, now unemployment with the minimum wage is an interesting topic in of itself. You can't look at unemployment overall because minimum wage workers are around 2% of the workforce. You have to look at the unemployment among people who would work at the minimum wage, which is usually half of whom are under 25, most of which don't even have are either in high school or just graduated high school.
I have seen data that directly contradicts that most minimum wage workers are over the age of 30, most of them are women, and most of them have children.
Half of minimum wage workers are under 25, so half are obviously over 25.
And I mean this with all due respect, but do you have citations for that? Because that contradicts citation.
I'm going by when I last read the BLS numbers on it. They vary by year, so maybe it's possible that over 25, it's now like 51 or 52%. But if I recall correctly, only 5% of minimum wage workers are single mothers. Now that doesn't mean that they're not mothers, but that's what I'm going by memory here. So forgive me, but
and it corresponds with my memory too.
But the other thing is that if you look at the minimum wage or the unemployment rate among the population as a whole with an increased minimum wage, you don't see any difference, especially either in absolute terms or relative to the
shorthand, but long term, you tend to see slight increases in employment.
Well, I mean, the Cardin-Kruger study has its own problems because it came during a recession, and the unemployment rate in New Jersey was lower than in Pennsylvania before the minimum wage came in New Jersey, and then the unemployment rate in New Jersey was higher than in Pennsylvania after it came in, but that was during a recession, which is usually when it's dangerous to increase the minimum wage.
Study that
are we going to deal with any of the studies where it shows that relative to the number of people that need their wages increased, the amounts, because this is one of the common complaints. Well, if McDonald's has to raise its rates to $15 an hour for all of its employees, I'm now going to have to pay $12.50 for a Big Mac, even though proportionately the reason that McDonald's is going to maybe raise its prices 3 cents an item.
It's going to 20 cents.
I think you're referring to if only McDonald's increased their wages $15 an hour, as opposed to every single worker that supplies anything to McDonald's, because then you have the entire supply chain becoming more costly.
Let me ask you this: like at this point, then what you're saying is that most of the United States economy requires a workforce that subsists on a wage that doesn't provide them with the means to actually pay for their living.
Most people
so
don't
what we
look at that
essentially need is a subsistence workforce that doesn't require.
I don't think it follows that if 2% of workers are minimum wage workers, that even if they are the only ones struggling, that the majority of workers are struggling.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we can now actually argue that what we need is slaves.
Again,
where are we in the rotation?
I don't think we have one.
No, because Leo's been making me wait.
So I did want to give Sphincter a Doom a chance to respond. Then I'd like to make a point. We got to get to Jim. We've got to get to Jim.
Jim's been talking in the private chat the whole time.
If he's willing to delegate to other people, then that's fine. But I do want to give that guy a chance to jump in. He's been quiet for like 25 minutes.
Jim, jump in.
I can talk about this all day. Just go to Jim. Let's have him some time.
Yeah, Jim needs to talk.
First time.
From topic to topic to topic. It's just like it's like trying to keep track of like 18 different topics. So what topic should we address first? Should we just stay on the minimum wage topic?
I think that's fair. Yes.
I think that's the weeks, Jim. You can go higher than that.
Okay, I mean, I guess what I would just say is minimum wage is going to have an impact on the price unless you have an efficiency gain in your supply chain, as someone was alluding to. Sphincter, or was it Flo? You guys were alluding to that, in which is multiple entities. I mean, it's a monumental effort, and it's not going to happen overnight. Where your price of your Big Mac will then go down from like $12 to $6 again, for example. Like it doesn't work. So at some level, you're going to have some form of that occurring. Now,
the problem has been though.
Hold on. I do want to give Jim a chance to finish because he's been quiet for a while.
There may be a potential solution here, and again, like I don't believe there's a fully free market economy. I don't believe there's a fully socialist economy, or that are both successful on the fringes, right? As I was kind of alluding to earlier. So if you mandate minimum wage, you have to deregulate somewhere, because regulations create a negative feedback loop along with taxes and stuff like that will cause the price of something to go up.
What would be an example of that?
Hold on. Before anybody jumps in, really quick, I just want to make sure, Jim, did you finish your point that you want to make?
I mean, that's fine.
Okay. That is true. I do want to let Mr. Parker go next, but I've also been kind of like silent in terms of addressing issues. Just wanted to make a quick point that the original study I was citing was not the one by the I believe it was two individuals as Sphincter mentioned. The one that I'm citing is a meta-analysis by Paul Stahn and Janet Lathrop, and they showed that there's just really no data to indicate, and not that necessarily he was making this point, just to throw it out there, that there's really no indication that increases in minimum wage result in reductions in employment. But then I also wanted to provide a quote from a 2019 study from the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, and they say, quote, taking those effects into account, CBO estimates that families whose income would be below the poverty threshold under current law would receive an additional $8 billion in real family income in 2025 under this option. That would amount to a 5.3% increase in income on average for such families. That extra income would move on net roughly 1.3 million people out of poverty. I don't think anybody here would deny that's a negative.
A lie.
But that's this is from the CBO. Real income.
I suggest that you ask real business owners in real life. Ask them how that would impact their business.
Real income would fall.
It's a lie. It's a lie.
I don't think it's a lie.
All right,
that would
be long enough.
Can I finish what I was saying?
I question Flow State's ability to know what a lie is. Because he trusted Trump.
Listen, I'm about to mention a quick recommendation, and then you can keep yammering. I suggest that you ask a small business owner in real life how
somebody needs Flow State.
Guys, God damn sake, what the fuck?
Shut up.
Stop talking like that. God damn it. One of you talk and the other one listen, and then take turns. Jesus fucking Christ!
We were so good for most of the night.
I never even got to finish my point. Number one, both of my uncles are business owners. Number two, one of my aunts is a PhD economist working at Iowa State University. The idea that I don't understand how this affects actual businesses is just wrong. Anyway, the final statement that the CBO mentions. Actually, I don't know if I would necessarily argue this, but in some senses could be argued to work in your favor. Quote, real income would fall by about $16 billion for families above the poverty line. But this is the caveat. That would reduce their total income by 0.1%. The point that I want to get at is this. Anybody who argues against a raise in the minimum wage, my only question is this. Please explain how reducing consumer purchasing power in a consumer-based economy leads to economic growth.
Not having a minimum wage doesn't reduce consumer power.
In what way? But those people would make less money and thus are able to buy less.
Would they? We had an industrial revolution before the minimum wage even exists.
Yes, and that industrial revolution wasn't the result of people making good money. It was the result of massive firms buying up shares of their market and investing in R&D to mechanize the economy. But those returns were not seen by the workers who were involved.
I think there's an important thing that's often overlooked is that while a lot of people are workers, everyone is consumers. So if consumer purchasing power goes... Because
not everyone is consumers.
Hold on.
Everyone is a consumer. Everyone eats. Everyone lives in a home pretty much. So everyone's a consumer. So if consumer bargaining power goes up because the cost of items goes down, even if workers don't gain all of the gains in that productivity, poverty overall can still go down, and that's exactly what happened.
I'm not necessarily arguing that consumer purchasing power goes up and that the cost of living goes down. What I'm arguing is that cost of living increases do not offset and have not been shown to offset increases in the minimum wage, whereas increases in the minimum wage have shown an increase in consumer purchasing power, a greater velocity of money through the economy, which in turn results directly in an increased demand for products and services, which in turn benefits the economy overall. I have to be honest, I haven't seen any studies that disagree with that.
All right, I got a break in here. So this whole thing about coulda, shoulda, woulda, maybe, can, will, let's look at what does happen in, we'll pick manufacturing. When wages go up, production output per employee per hour goes up. And that company makes an even higher amount of profit per employee than they did before. We see this time and time again in industry after industry after industry. This happens at bread factories. This happens at plastic factories. This happens everywhere that they do manufacturing. When they increase the wages of the employee, their product output increases in proportion to that. And they get more product output increase and more profit increase than they are getting percentage-wise of a wage increase. And so they may give a wage increase of 0.05%, but they
hold on.
No, and we see this time and time again. Then we also see this in the regular market as well. Case in point is an example of Johnson County in Iowa. Johnson County, as well as 2 other surrounding counties, decided that they were going to raise their minimum wage to $10 an hour. This was prior to any talk of a minimum wage being raised by the federal government. Well, local business owners, as well as other business owners in the surrounding area, said, this is going to kill our profits. This is going to kill our business and everything. Well, guess what actually happens? Well, what actually happens is people left lower earning areas, moved to these higher earning areas. The businesses that thought they were going to go out of business started doing more business. The people that were living there, they started living better lives. The cities were making more money, and business owners in other counties that could not convince their county board to raise that minimum wage, then lobbied the governor of the fucking state to put in a rule.
Branstad at the time, wasn't it?
Yes, lobbied Branstad to make it illegal for any county to raise their minimum wage above the federal minimum wage.
They used
because the other counties didn't want to compete, and because they didn't want to compete in terms of paying people more money, better workers, shittier workers, however you want to look at it, they all flowed to the better paying jobs, and they increased like I said, in Johnson County is a huge manufacturing area. We got 3M, we got plastics, we have several Procter and Gamble facilities. There's a ton of manufacturing.
Live in Iowa, by the way.
Yeah, you can't drive down any of the streets without passing a manufacturing facility.
Yes, and I did want to piggyback off of what Puff was saying. That
we always made more money, and even at my tire shop that was started by a Iraqi immigrant that sold his only car to start that business. So obviously, it was not a big business. We had 4 employees, and one of them was the owner. The other one was his brother, and I was the only one that was a native English speaker. So that was a very tiny business, and yet every time he increased our pay, his profits increased exponentially. Why? Yeah. Because our output increased, because we could go home and get a better meal in our stomachs. We could afford better health care, and I could treat myself better at the job so that I could produce more for him.
But that doesn't
scale.
Like
you're arguing for a minimum wage increase.
The thing is, I wanted to piggyback off of what Puff said, is that because Flow State made a comment that, well, if minimum wage increases are so good, why aren't businesses doing that? Because minimum wage increases are beneficial in the long term. Most large monopolistic firms don't give a shit about long-term profitability. They care about how much money can I make as quickly. I don't care about 5 years from now. I want to know
what can I make right now?
How much money can I make?
Capitalism.
But
the success of capitalism, a capitalistic system. Because
I didn't finish. The point is, you cannot have a consumer-based economy if consumers can't consume. You increase their wages.
That's correct.
What do they do with the money? They go and spend it at business firms, increasing the velocity of money in the economy, increasing the flow at which goods and services move out of a firm, thereby increasing the demand for those goods and services, which in turn can cause these firms to hire more people. Like this is literally.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
You cannot have
the reason that Puff's
based economy if consumers can't consume.
The reason that Puff's example worked is because there wasn't a blanket a blanket minimum wage law. So in effect, even though it was implemented by a government mandate, the fact that it was just a county, it models free market competition. Jeff, what's with the debate?
You can have markets to operate freely in a market socialism. I'm going to say this one more time because I've said it so many times tonight, and I've got 40 minutes until it's no longer tonight. A market socialist structure preserves market forces and market incentives.
And here's the thing.
Differences is just really quickly and then I'm going to be honest, I want Mr. Parker to chime in after me because he's been quiet for a while too. One of the biggest differences is that in a market socialist system, the structure of firms operating in the market isn't autocratic, it's democratic. All the participants in that firm have a say in how it operates. On top of that, particular market forces and market incentives I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Market incentives. When you have incentives in a market that is inelastic, like our healthcare system, what you tend to see that I don't care what anybody says. The U.S. healthcare system is an inelastic market.
It is.
The prices of the services and the goods in our healthcare market are not dependent on what people will pay for them. That's what they want, though. It's an inelastic market. That would be eliminated in a market socialist model, whereby all markets would be elastic, whereby the services that are or the goods that are provided to consumers are dependent upon the average base price that consumers are willing to pay. We do not see that in the U.S. healthcare market. That's why the United States has some of the highest prices for pharmaceuticals in the world, and that is an indisputable fact.
Well, the reason why prices are the reason why healthcare is so expensive in the U.S. is two things: one, supply is restricted, and two, demand is subsidized.
That's an inelastic market.
That is not an inelastic market.
That's literally an inelastic market.
I'm typing this out.
An inelastic market is where the demand does not change.
Do you guys understand what happens? What do you guys think happens in a privatized health market when pharmaceutical companies are able to advertise drugs?
Innovation.
No.
I just want to say we have until 1 o'clock. Then I have to go to bed and I have to cut the live. But you guys can hang out and argue as long as you want. But just let everybody know we've got about 37 minutes of live time.
I want to really quick moderation, Jeff. Have your quick rejoinder there, but I do want to go to Mr. Parker after that.
Okay. So as it turns out, for a very long time, the idea of advertising drugs in TV advertisements, magazines, or whatever was actually considered unethical for a long time. And then after quite a bit in the United States, it was actually considered unethical to do that because the idea was that if you advertised some of these drugs to the public would then go to their doctors. It would create a demand for the particular drug, for the particular condition, and it would lead to more people falsely identifying their conditions with whatever the drug treated. So this was a long time ago. I think this was back in like the 70s. After they got rid of that and they thought that was stupid and they decided to go the whole free market capitalism rip and run libertarian bullshit, they decided to we just advertise all this kind of stuff as much as we want. Now as it turns out, if you watch TV shows or something like that, pretty much all the ads that you see are just some ad for like some various ass drug, right? And the reason they advertise them is so that when you go to your doctor and you've got an issue like dry eye or dry genitals or too moist genitals or whatever, you're going to actually bring up whatever that drug was that you saw with the weird ass song and stuff in it. And then when you bring that up, they'll probably have samples because one of their pharmacy reps was probably already at that doctor's office and probably already dealt with this, right? So this has been a thing for a while. This has been an issue in healthcare for at least the last 30 to 40 years. A lot of people don't realize that it is. The majority of Americans think that the fact that pharmaceutical companies advertise their particular drugs on TV is perfectly fucking okay, because the average American has the ethics of a snail. The reason that this is a bad thing is that before this, 40 years ago, it was considered ethically reprehensible to advertise drugs like this in any way, and no medical firm in any way, shape, or form, or doctor, or in any other way, shape, or form would ever do anything like this. Now they do.
Well,
So
I don't know what this ethics thing you talk about is, but just give me. I don't know what your ethics thing is, but just give me one reason why I should not go to. Why I don't need to go to my doctor and ask him how Cymbalta can help my life.
Yeah, good question.
Okay, hold on.
Do you understand what you just did there?
Yes.
Your doctor didn't. Okay, hang on. Your doctor didn't find something, and it was like, you know what? I know some drugs or something that actually might help you. What actually happened was that the company that made Cymbalta or whatever drug it was wrote up a bunch of stuff and provided a catchy ass ad that plays on every ad break on cable news. And when you go to your doctor, you ask your doctor, "Hey, can Cymbalta help me with X, Y, or Z?" And your doctor's like, no. The reason that this was considered unethical before was that because, here's the thing, the idea behind medicine is that it's not supply-based, it's demand-based. So if you supply people with the idea of a drug that can treat them for a various condition or something like that, and you feed them an advertisement for it, they will actually go to their doctor and tell their doctor that they actually have that particular disease and that they need that particular drug. That's the problem. You created a demand when there wasn't a demand before.
But Arnold Palmer and Adam Carolla made it look so cool on that golf course, and I just want to be in on that scene, man.
Okay, but if
you're making my point for me.
Sunflower's trying to get in. For some reason, Sunflower's microphone is super low.
Is it low?
Yeah, but I want to give Mr. Parker a chance to chime in here.
So I guess we're moving to healthcare. Or are we
well, I just want to address this point though. Like you can't go to a doctor and say,
it's Mr. Parker's turn.
Okay.
So I'm gonna mention minimum wage just a little bit, and then I'll get about the ethical dilemma or whatever. 38% of Americans live below the poverty line, according to the census by the government. I don't think I would be a proud business owner by saying that I live above the poverty line, but all my workers live below the poverty line. I think that is a morally representative or a terrible thing to say or to do, actually, by paying your employees a wage that they can't live off. And be it that, small businesses can't afford such wages, like, 15, whatever. I don't think if you can't pay your employees a living wage, then you shouldn't run a business. I mean, that's my honest opinion. What?
What about, like, say, a startup, brand new startup business that's just taken off and it needs a little part-time help, neighbor kid after school, a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of nuance.
Minimum, you don't get an exception for being a startup with the minimum, like the federal minimum wage now. Like if you're
an exception if you hire disabled people, certain ones.
Yeah, there's certain exceptions or whatever. I don't know.
I mean, I'm just pointing out that hardline approach that you don't deserve to have a business if it can't pay everybody $15 an hour in all circumstances.
Well, who said it has to be $15 an hour? If you're starting a business firm and it can't provide a
don't get lost on that point. It's an arbitrary number.
And that's what I was recognizing. But if you start a business firm and it cannot provide to all of its employees a decent standard of living, then either A, you aren't running it properly, or B, you have too many people working for you than what's necessary. There is no way.
That actually is a good point that I wanted to raise before. So a lot of people like to compare Walmart versus Costco, and setting aside the fact that Walmart sells a lot more varied things than Costco. So Costco employs 1/4 the number of people Walmart does per dollar of revenue. but Costco pays much higher wages often. Like, I think it starts at like 16 an hour and then upwards of 20 pretty quickly. But that's kind of the point, is that there is a trade-off. You can either hire a lot of low skill or at least low productive people at a low wage, or fewer more skilled people at a higher wage. And also Costco's business model is subsidized by their member dues, but it's important to recognize that what matters is the value of your labor.
Why are you making an unfair comparison, though?
Why is that comparison unfair?
Because you're comparing Walmart, a business is open to the public to walk in free of charge and peruse the aisles as they want, right? So they have to have more employees, and you're comparing that to Costco, which is a membership-only establishment that you have to pay prior to entering to do business there. If you compare Costco to Sam's Club, they're just about even.
That's kind of my point.
Sam's Club is a business that, and if you go into Sam's Club, guess what, man? You don't see people walking in there to buy that don't have a lot of money, right? It is a I can afford to pay this amount of money. I've won at capitalism, and I can go in here and I can buy in bulk and get better deals than anybody else. But these people that can't afford to walk in and pay $100 to start shopping before you buy anything, they just suck at capitalism, man.
Can someone explain to me why we can't have a living wage? Someone just give me an ethical reason why.
It goes back to it's a mechanical answer, not a ethical one.
Well, it goes back to explain how reducing purchasing power in a consumer-based economy leads to economic growth, because it fucking doesn't.
Your assumption is that minimum wage.
There's literally not a single assumption,
but they don't.
Minimum wage is
yes, it is. Like that. That is a fact. That is literally an economic fact.
That is not a literal economic fact. No matter how many times you say it's a fact, it doesn't make it a fact.
If you increase consumer purchasing power in a consumer-based economy, you will get growth. That's literally how consumer-based economies work. They work off of how consumers act, how they participate in an economy. 70% of U.S. economic activity is consumer spending. So what you are saying is that you want to pay people so low that they're not able to buy anything.
That factor might be which ignores business-to-business transactions, which if included would be the plurality of economic activity.
Which reduces consumer spending.
I'm going to play moderator now.
Wrangles the economy.
I'm going to play moderator now. Jefferson is like waving his hand. I'm going to let him go. And then, y'all get back to arguing. We have 28 minutes.
I wanted to...
Up to Jefferson, I'd like to have a quick word as well, because I need to go as well. Go ahead, Jeff. No, go ahead.
I should open up a portal so that you and I can chat. I wanted to point out this a user that's in the top chat. His name is Ian Spiker. He pointed this out, and I wanted to use this as an example of like some of the fake news that's out there, because this guy says, Jefferson Spatch guy, bruh, when Obamacare passed, if you didn't sign up, you got fined. WTF are you on about? Now, I remember when the Obamacare thing actually went into existence. I remember when the system went online at the first point when it was full of weird glitches and stuff. I signed up for it. You did not get fined for not signing up for Obamacare. That took like 2 or 3 years actually before you actually got hit with that fine. That didn't actually work. So I wrote something like that back. He wrote back, not even messing with it. You should have tried to not sign up if you wanted to know the alternative. I have no idea what he means by that. This idea that the Obamacare thing was just this.
I didn't have healthcare. I didn't have healthcare in that period, and I didn't pay a fine for the first 2 years.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people that I know didn't have it either. I signed up for it. I was covered under it for exactly 1 year. I got hired in as a civil servant, and so it automatically dropped that. I did have a sibling that was covered for part of the last year when the actual fines came into existence, and that did have an effect on his taxes. but not to the effect that this guy's talking about. So, like, this idea that these guys are talking about, like I didn't, and that was one of the things that I didn't like about the idea of like the mandatory fine. You know, you will get private health insurance through the Obamacare network, or you will pay a tax fine.
I think it was
thought that
unconstitutional. I personally think it was unconstitutional. They overstepped their bounds. He should have done what he said he was going to fucking do. Had a
public option.
Yeah, the public option instead of that fucking bullshit that they passed.
Well, that's because
And
that
to
was
me,
Obama that did that. That was the Democratic Party under the guy with all the donations and the lobbying.
I mean, not to perpetuate that. I mean, because Obamacare definitely had. I mean, Republicans screwed Obamacare from the beginning, so most of the faults of Obamacare was due to Republicans doing their thing. So I'm not trying to demonize it, but
Romney care.
Yeah, what you're saying there about the public or about the fine itself, I believe was that aspect of it was unconstitutional.
Romney care was passed with a veto-proof majority. It wasn't Romney's plan. But,
well, no, it was based off of something called Romney Care.
It was based off the Massachusetts healthcare system.
But also, Massachusetts at that point had the third highest healthcare cost after Alaska and DC. So really, how much? It didn't really.
Exactly. It was designed to be a compromise with Republicans. It backfired because Republicans refused to compromise on anything.
Romney and the Massachusetts government ripped the idea off from what the Republicans had proposed as an alternative to Hillary care back in the 90s.
Yep.
That was the Dole plan.
That's when they first started demonizing Hillary. Was way back then over universal health care. You know?
This idea that I always love this stuff when these guys are like, well, these Democrats, like, those Democrats, when those Democrats come up with ideas like that, especially the them goddamn centrists come up with ideas like that, you're absolutely right. Yeah. They're full of shit.
The moderate Republicans is what I call them.
This bullshit that you guys are like spinning out, like, you left wingers had these ideas. Those are not left wing ideas. Those were people that you labeled left wing that came up with Republican ideas and put them out there.
The universal health care, the right wing compromise was, well, we can do some form of like public option that still funnels most of the profit to the health.
Healthcare, I actually did a numerical analysis project in college for my final project, and I actually attempted to isolate the potential impact of single payer healthcare, or by single payer, I should be more accurately say the percent of healthcare spending that is public but via the government, and how much of an impact that has on cost. And I will fully admit that it wasn't an exhaustive thing because it was just like a little college project. But I counted for about 8 or 9 different factors, like median household income, cancer incidence, doctors per capita, population density, percent of costs that are out of pocket, several of them. And the impact of public spending was actually, relative to other factors, fairly inconsequential. Now, what I mean to say is that there are arguments to say why we should have single payer healthcare, but there really isn't any strong evidence that single payer healthcare will necessarily reduce costs.
I have 6 scholarly articles,
here's the problem.
Literature that would disagree.
Well, here's the problem. Almost, and every paper that I've read, and we might have read different sources, is that each one of them seems to, in my mind, just looks at the presence or absence of it and doesn't try to isolate it from any other potential factors. Like, for example, the U.S. has the highest obesity rate in the developed world. It has one of the highest, if not the highest, homicide rate in the developed world. That's going to put a strain on the healthcare system. We also have some of the highest pharmaceutical prices, mostly due to patent scheduling.
Hang on. One of the things that we actually have a problem with in terms of like obesity problems that actually has a lot to do with our cultural issues.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of that is based on things like government lobbying.
Oh, absolutely. Sugar farms are 2% of farms, but 25% of farm lobbying. And then you also got the corn farms. Like that's a huge problem.
The thing is, corn farms aren't lobbying anybody. It's the people who sell the seed to the corn farmers that are lobbying. Because I can tell you, Joe Blow, who lives 4 country miles down, ain't fucking lobbying the government. But the company that he buys the seed from, Monsanto, sure as hell is.
Yeah. There was a corn company down in Greensburg that sold corn and made corn, but it's actually more profitable for them to just sell seed and have someone else do it for them than actually doing the corn itself. And
Right. Okay. So,
government.
here's my problem with some of this kind of stuff, because one of the things that usually comes about, with this kind of stuff is like, well, we got these horrible fucking statistics, but it turns out that the reason these statistics are so fucking horrible is because America and Americans are so fucking horrible. And usually the reason that those are the conditions is because there's usually some kind of lobbyist or something that's actually made those conditions actually the case. So, I'm a little bit weirded out by this idea that most of this stuff I think should probably come to an end. You probably would agree with that. What bothers me about some of this stuff when it comes to these cases is that I don't think anyone should be arguing this stuff the way that they've been arguing it. But and yet,
I did want to comment really quickly on the healthcare thing. This is from the Annals of Internal Medicine. It's a study done by David Himmelstein, Terry Campbell, and Steffi Woodhandler. And in it they say, quote, U.S. insurers and providers spend $812 billion on administration, amounting to roughly $2,500 per capita, or 34.2% of national health expenditures, versus $551 per capita, or 70% in Canada. 844 versus 146 on insurers' overhead. 933. I didn't finish. 933 versus 196 for hospital administration. 255 versus 123 for nursing home care, and hospice administration, and 465 versus 87 for physicians' insurance-related costs. Of the 3.2 percentage point increase in administration share of the U.S. health expenditure since 1999, 2.4 percentage points was due to growth in private insurance overhead, mostly because of high overhead in their Medicare and Medicaid managed care plans.
Can you link that in the chat?
Well, not only that. So my problem is
not the only study I have, and that's only relative to Canada. I've got many more.
I've read a number of administrative comparison studies too, and a number of them admit that it's kind of difficult to compare country to country or even between different systems, because what counts as administration will vary. For example, in Medicare, they have a 10% fraud rate because they don't spend enough to pursue it. Now, some of that fraud may not count as fraud under a universal system, but nonetheless, they also don't really incur legal expenses because you can't really sue Medicare like you can private companies, or the DOJ will cover you. They don't have to pay, the Medicare doesn't have to employ people in collections because the IRS does that. But in looking at per capita administrative costs in Medicare versus the private system in the U.S., Medicare actually spends more per capita in dollars than the private healthcare system, and it's important. Like the percent,
I would agree with that.
So, and it's not like people on Medicare. So people on Medicare, so Medicare is about 20% of healthcare spending, but people over 65 are 30 to 33% of healthcare spending. So it's not as if everything is even covered for people who are currently eligible for Medicare, but how much is spent administratively is not based on how much the cost of the procedure is. It's not as if, oh, well, this surgery is going to cost $10,000, but this surgery is going to cost $40,000. That doesn't really cost much more to file administratively. So the percent of your costs that are administration is kind of a red herring. What determines is the number of claims and the complexity of the claims, and that's why I think a dollars per capita thing. So. One of the big issues in the U.S. is that many of the things holding back the healthcare system, I won't say all, but many of the things that are making administrative costs in the private healthcare system higher than it needs to be also affect Medicare as well, and that's what we're kind of seeing. And many of those universal systems, when they're implemented, they kind of strip away a lot of the red tape that was there before, either because of politics, or they kind of realize like, oh, well, if we did this, then this system would be just as bad. And I don't know who else is a veteran in here, but I was in the Navy, and naval medical care as well as the VA is
no bueno.
Fucking go to war.
It is very slow. It's very much. It was especially slow last year. I got hurt and I needed treatment. My treatment kept getting delayed because it was not essential. But that's not really. It was getting delayed more than it probably needed to be. But
military. If you guys want a good example of universal healthcare, like the military healthcare, like granted, like it's better than no healthcare, but it is not effective.
So,
it is terrible.
Have you actually looked into the history of the privatization of military healthcare?
Wait, could I provide?
No. Via choice is certainly a thing, but and I'm not, and I don't say that as this single payer healthcare or government healthcare is inherently bad. What I'm afraid of is that because of the current infrastructure that's in place, that makes our current examples bad. I don't think simply like Medicare for all, for example, is going to work as well as people think because of what we in the U.S. Because at minimum because of the administrative kind of environment.
Hang on.
So-
When you come up with this idea, when you prop up this idea, like, hey, if you want an idea of how bad national healthcare or single payer healthcare, what are just look at the military stuff, and I'm like, yeah, look at the military stuff. Look how privatized it's been in the last 10, 15 years, and you're just like, well, no, I don't want to look at it like exactly like that. Like,
I will be perfectly honest. I was in the Navy from 2003 to 2009. The VA is better now than it was in 2009. Now, I'm not going to say that's simply because it's more privatized. I'm saying that it is better now than it was 10 years ago. And how much of that is due to what? I can't really form an argument for that either way because
they exerted more top-down control on TRICARE.
Wait, so I wanted to provide a rejoinder to what Sphincter said. So the study from Annals that I just gave doesn't talk about just administrative costs. It also talks about insurers' overhead, hospital administration, nursing home, home care, and hospice administration, as well as physicians' insurance-related costs. But I also wanted to cite a meta-analysis of 22 single-payer plans from journals.plos.org.
Let me get in front of that.
In which they state, quote, our search yielded economic analyses of the cost of
Flo's got to go, man.
plans.
Parker got to go, man. You're going to go
Our search yielded economic analyses of the cost of 22 single-payer plans over the past 30 years. Exclusions were due to inadequate technical data or assuming a substantial ongoing role for private insurers. We found that 19 or 86% of the analyses predicted net savings or a median net result was a savings of 3.46% of total costs in the first year of program operation, and 20 or 91% predicted savings over several years. Anticipated growth rates would result in long-term net savings for all plans, end quote. So it seems to me to be the case that single-payer healthcare plans are cheaper and cover more people as almost
Leo,
what is the basis of that analysis? Is it just looking at
let Flow State go, and then somebody else wanted to go, but we've literally 13 minutes of live time. Y'all can argue all you want.
This will be quick.
Go.
The reason that I asked for the link is because I wanted to open the author articles and disclosures. Financial support, a grant from the Open Society Foundation, assisted with the purchase of data here. Also, Dr. Hamelstein reports that he co-founded and remains active in the professional organization Physicians for National Health program. He served as an unpaid policy advisor to Bernie Sanders and has co-authored research-related manuscripts with
literally none of this matters.
With Elizabeth Warren.
It's published in one of the world's most respected medical journals.
You can buy
no.
just as easy as you can buy politicians.
Adequate
what I'm
data.
saying is that these are not unbiased parties. These are politically affiliated.
Leo, let Flow State be. Flow State's being a Trumper right now. Let him be a Trumper.
Political bias for the information, but it is literally a
Dude just won't stop talking for anything.
Because you're presenting a non-argument.
I'm showing you a concept of interest. If it's a non-argument, why do they have to legally
the argument that you're making is no different than when a creationist says, so-and-so worked at Harvard, and they're an atheist. So
do you not understand what conflict of interest is?
Evolution is wrong because it's a conflict of interest. No,
Leo, why are they obligated to disclose these things if they don't matter?
It directly conflicts with what is public. In one of the world's most respected medical journals,
I'm gonna
present.
I have to turn my shit on and start muting people.
The argument that they have some bias, then you're just committing a fallacy.
I would agree that Flow State's. Wait, I would agree that Flow State's making the problem of a fallacy that, I mean, arguments are valid or invalid regardless who presents them. But Leo, I think you're making a similar fallacy. Like, well, it's the most world respected journal. So there's the argument, like, we should be asking, what is the basis of the analysis? What is the data set? And is this a sound analysis? We shouldn't do argument from authority, and we also shouldn't be they're biased.
And
you were flirting with it. You didn't say.
Well,
I wasn't saying that it's
arguing
wrong
that data
for sure.
published
I'm just
one of the
saying
world's
you've got to look at who's presenting this stuff, which he did not.
considerable than
Leo.
Leo,
you gotta let him talk, dude. You gotta let him talk.
Leo presented, when Leo read from this, he was presenting it as if it was an undisputed fact. And what I'm saying is,
no, I wasn't.
Well,
No,
that
he wasn't.
Okay, then maybe I misunderstood him. But what I'm saying is, not that this is an invalid study. It may be valid, but there is reason to question their methods and their motivations for sure. That's why the disclosure's there.
Yeah, and all these liberal evolutionists can't be questioned. You know, they're just we've got to question them because they're
What the fuck are you talking about?
Conspiracy to go against God. That's literally the argument that you're presenting. Is that the conclusions of the study disagree with me, so there must be some sort of internal bias that makes it that way, without actually addressing any of the information that they present.
Okay.
Mr. Parker would like to.
Yeah, Mr. Parker's got his hand up.
What did I do?
We got 10 minutes, y'all.
Okay, for fuck's sakes. I've been trying to get this 20 minutes because you guys keep bringing up studies, and I put in a meta-analysis that includes 39 studies. I think it's 39 studies, and just what Flo stated about author statements. This says no funding was received. Competing interests. The author declared that they have their conflicts of interest. And what this meta-analysis says is that a single-payer system has lower remuneration costs through economics of scale, which implies that its cost advantage arises with increased output, which is attributed to optimal usage of its resources. And then, like, it just goes on. It's a very amazing study, and it's not in favor of single player or multiplayer. It's it says it's inconclusive about single player, but it references like over like 59 studies. It's very good. I posted in the private chat. If I got mod, I would post it in the YouTube chat. But it's a very good meta-analysis about it.
Okay,
and anyone can check it out.
Could I just say something then, right, at this point, before anybody else gets in to start some other conversation? Which is to say, thank you very much, Rach. I really appreciate being in the Hangout. Thank you, Leo, for the conversation earlier. I learned a bit. I want to finish up now, and I think everybody should just go around the room and say one thing and finish up before it goes on there, and then continue the argument down this Medicare or American medical system stuff. I'm going to just drag it back to the original conversation for a moment here. All right, pointing out some of the flaws in capitalism is not advocating that those same flaws couldn't happen under a different system. So I do think that saying that in a consumer-based society, then we need to pay more at the bottom, and that would help the consumer base spend money. I completely agree with that. I've got no problem at all saying that, but I don't think that's advocating for the type of social society that you're talking about. Although what you're talking about may have a result in paying the lower end more money. I've got no doubt about that, but it seems to me that would decrease the profits of the company. And then we're on to another cycle of Marxist critique of capitalism, right? Which doesn't really help the problem. So I don't think you've really addressed the main issues there. The second point is, again, although I agree that one of the huge issues with capitalism is that the wage gap between the highest earners and the lowest earners has expanded almost exponentially in the last few years, I would say, but certainly since the 70s in the States, and over here probably since the 90s. And that is a huge, huge issue that needs to be addressed by government, and I would say through regulation can be done. The same way government tries to tackle monopolies, which is the other criticism you leveled at capitalism, and I think that is done in tight regulation. Although companies manage to find a way around it, of course, through various lobbying systems, etc. But that's not the fault of capitalism. That's the fault of the political system, right? So again, I think you're conflating things when you level all of these arguments against capitalism. They're not really against capitalism. They're against the libertarian capitalism that Jeff's talking about.
Which is
But I
capitalism.
don't know anybody in this hangout that's tried to advocate for libertarian free market. So
Which is capitalism.
again, I think it's kind of strawman in some respects. I think I would love to talk more with you on your idea of socialism, of what it really means, rather than try and concentrate on capitalism, because I think that's kind of not really helping, because we seem to go down the weeds every time people drag in examples, and that doesn't help. Anyway, that's my last thing. Thank you so much, Lee. I really enjoyed the debate. I enjoyed your part particularly, and also Cider's as well, but your part particularly was very good. And, I'd like to see more of you do this kind of thing. And I'd like to have this conversation with you one-on-one at some point to concentrate on just socialism rather than capitalism. But anyway, also, it's great meeting Jim as well. I really want you to hear more from you. And likewise, everybody else that I haven't met in the room. Rage, what can I say? I'm Simon Funk, the atheist. Have been all my life, and I love being an atheist. And go atheism. And
thanks for coming on, man.
Alright, I'm just gonna grab the mic real quick to give my closing. It was alright. It was pretty good. But the thing is, I'm just gonna just please take this as constructive criticism, Leo. The thing is, you have great points, you have great data, you have great things, but you have terrible interpersonal communication skills, and you got to work on that, because the thing is, wait a second. I understand you disagree, and you have that's where you need to develop some more self-introspection, right? It's not something that's going to happen right now. It's not going to happen. But the thing is, when you constantly interject and then you railroad people, you ramrod them, you just keep talking and talking and talking when they're in the middle of a conversation, just like you're doing right now, even though I'm trying to help you out. What it does is people that are listening, right, and trying to hear your points, it starts grating like a car getting drugged sideways down the road. And then your interlocutor just puts up the walls because they see you do what you did right there, and you just shut off. You're not communicating. The communication is how you change people's minds. Throwing data at them does nothing. It's the conversation and the way that you go into it that makes it so effective. Because, like Jefferson Sachcock, it's not so much the weight of the information that he has, but it's the delivery method that is used, right? Jim on the other side also has a good delivery method for the information that he wants to deliver. However contradictory to our positions it may be, but it makes it, you have to present this information in a palatable form. So that's why I
that is true, but people also have to properly represent the information that I'm presenting and not strawman it and not make idiotic arguments against it that have absolutely nothing to do with the argument that was presented.
That is understandable. That's not that. I'm not addressing the content. I'm addressing the delivery and the interaction method.
Well, yeah, but I would also hold my opponents to the same standard, that if you're going to interact with somebody, you need to properly represent your person's argument and ensure that the arguments or the counter arguments that you are providing are not fallacious.
Wait. That's the smallest component of communication between two people.
I would argue it's pretty large.
No, the information is not the biggest part of communication between
people. I wasn't talking about the information. I was talking about how my interlocutor is representing it and representing the argument that I am making from it.
Right. You have to make it digestible. You have to make it in a palatable, presentable way that they...
I think I do.
It doesn't when you continue on and on and on and on and on, like when Flow State was making his idiotic, stupid ass fucking point. Just let him make it, because otherwise your well structured and factual reply to it lands with no weight.
So I think what he's trying to say is, even when someone is making a bad argument or even misrepresenting your argument, give them enough a rope to hang themselves with. I'm not going to comment on how the merits of Flow State's argument to which he refers, but it's definitely you have to let them do that, because if his argument is bad, and misunderstandings happen, obviously, but I mean, if he's willingly misrepresenting you, just point that out when you turn to respond. Right, but sometimes you just kind of talk over them or you interrupt them, and
then
that's what I think Puff is referring to. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
That, but it's also the conversation. I'm sorry to cut in, but it's that, and also like when anybody was making a point, right? I understand that people want to jump in on points, but when you ramrod and railroad over people, it does more damage to the movement that we're trying to do, the effect we're trying to make. It does more damage to that than it does good for the cause.
I think what Puff was trying to say is like there's this aspect of reciprocity when you have a conversation, right? You want it to be somewhat equal. If not, the people that you're having this conversation with, if it's not equal, then they just shut off and they don't care anymore. So yes, people are going to misrepresent your points. I got on Puff earlier about misrepresenting our side of the argument. It's going to happen, but in the conversation, there has to be some form of reciprocity in order to actually make it meaningful.
I mean, I agree with that, but when somebody's misrepresenting your point, you have the right to interrupt them and provide clarification.
It's not.
Well, moving on.
Then that's just a fundamental
disagreement. I think Leo gets the point, whether or not he's gonna openly say you guys are right. Okay, let's move on.
I would like to give everybody, because I mean, for the most part, this was a great conversation all night long.
I agree.
So I would like to give everybody a final word, and I do need to get my ass to bed. So yeah, we can do that, and I just want to say that for the most part, and Leo gets passionate, and that's one of the things I like about him. But for the most part, I think this conversation what the debate wasn't, and I do want to thank the interlocutors that came in for capitalism, because I think that we got a better representation of their points than we got in the debate earlier. Yeah. So I do want to give everybody a chance to say farewell.
My farewell is it's literally in the structure of a debate that it's against the rules to interrupt people. I'm out.
All right.
I'll do a real quick one. One of my favorite headlines ever is from the BBC. I put it in the chat, and it is, quote, "Tax rises needed to prevent NHS misery." And then the next line is, "Taxes are going to have to rise to pay for the NHS if the UK is to avoid a, quote, decade of misery in which the vulnerable are let down." So people praising the NHS, check that link out. The NHS is absolutely garbage. It's one of the worst healthcare systems of all time in the world, in the sophisticated first world. Thanks. Peace out, Sunflower for life.
Well, you guys can stay.
Yeah, just because I have to go to bed does not mean the room ends. Like, this thing can go all freaking night, so y'all can argue all night. I just have to go to bed because I'm old.
And I think this is kind of interesting though, because they're like checking out. They give their statement and then they leave.
I'm not gonna tolerate those fucking idiotic arguments towards Icarus, so I'm gonna time your bitch ass out.
I mean, I'm on Pacific time, so it's not too late for me.
Icarus has always been fair.
Yeah, no, I timed out Brady D because he said, "Be a man, Icarus. Don't let them rape your daughters." What happened to Germany, man? Used to be proud, strong people. Now they get on the get. Now they get on the get back to that Icarus. Stop being a. I'm sorry. No. No, I'm sorry.
I thought you was talking about timing out Icarus. And I'm like, I like Icarus.
No.
I call him Icarus. Icarus. I don't know which one's right. I called them Icarus. I shouldn't say.
But what he said is not acceptable. It's just not.
Well, Brady D, I think he's maybe Smoky Crowd. I'm not sure. I get a lot. I get a lot of those. But yeah, who's next? Who wants to say goodnight? Because I really have to go to bed.
I mean, I don't have a channel to promote, but I really appreciate. This was most debates like this are shouting matches or just very shallow, and I think this was a much better discussion. So I appreciate you having me on, and I'd be for talking about it more.
Yeah. Please come back on. And for. Because usually, I talk religion a lot. For a political stream like this we had pretty good viewership for me. So, please come back on. I thought that this was a great exchange all across the board. And I love having honest conversations with people that, usually with these kind of conversations, it delegates to screaming matches fairly quickly. So...
Well, I mean, yeah, I appreciate it, Rage. Great conversation. I would say great debate, but not really. Even I have my limits with that. So other than that, I appreciate it. And if you want to hear more from me, I have my own YouTube channel called The Meaning Forge. That's just kind of starting off. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking, and I have interviews lined up with a bunch of people, and I'm start streaming those soon. So
cool. Yeah, I'll definitely check you out.
Okay. I couldn't actually find you, Jim. So
just type in Meeting Forge, and then scroll down a little bit. I'll give you guys my link too.
Okay. I'll just stick my link in the side chat there if you wouldn't mind. Then I'll follow you straight back.
Okay.
Okay. As I said, I've already said my thanks. Thank you, Jeff. I didn't say that. Thank you, Mr. Parker. I haven't met you, Sphinx. Nice. Great to meet you, Flow State. Sub to everybody, especially like the video, Rage.
No, thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Who else? Flow State. I love it when you come on, dude. You are entertaining, and I give you that.
Well, thanks for having me. This was a good conversation, and I guess my parting thought would be I want to get a little meta on you and say that I think that both, no matter what your political standing is, or no matter whether you're a capitalist or a socialist, I think everybody's issue is ultimately the same one, and it's people with too much power abusing people with not enough power. And
I would agree with you.
I would encourage Leo to stop being a douchebag.
I'm just right. I'm just right.
All right, I'm still being meta.
They're not usually exclusive, Leo.
But I'd encourage people to remember, I think that the problem with the whole debate that we have as a society is that it externalizes the locus of power. I think that if you remember that, if you remember to internalize it, it sort of gives you more power and elevates you out of that status a bit. So take the power back in your own head. I got a channel.
Means of production.
Okay, that's not what I mean. I got a channel.
He means hashtag stop the steal.
Yeah, I dropped in the link, and anyways, thanks for having me.
I enjoy you, Flow State. Thank you for coming on, man.
I do like Flow State, though. I'm not gonna lie, I do like Flow State.
All right, Sphincter of Doom, did you go?
I did. I mean, I don't have anything more to say. Again, I love debating. It's just that most complex topics, like I said, they either have people who don't take it seriously or are trolls or pose. And
I did have a question for Sphincter.
Sure.
Was that Otangelo that you debated like a week or two ago, or was
that was Sal Cordova?
Oh, there we go. Yeah. How did you feel about that?
I felt like, so he wanted to have a pretty casual conversation. Like, he didn't want a straight up debate. And I felt like Sal, I like Sal. Sal is affable. He at least engages with your argument. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think he makes the same mistakes that creationists tend to make, which is A, argument from incredulity, and B, they kind of seem married to the idea that if one part of the Bible is wrong, then every part of the Bible is wrong, which isn't necessarily the case, but that's kind of how they go. I mean, there aren't penguins in the Bible either, but penguins exist. I mean, the Bible isn't all truth. It can be wrong about certain things, and really, whether the Bible is wrong about evolution or the origin of life, that doesn't say anything about whether it's right or wrong about the divinity of Jesus or what the right way to live your life is. So I don't really.
I think it depends on your level of Christianity, because a lot of Christians will claim that the Bible is infallible, and if they make that claim, then it's easy to disprove that claim.
I think a lot of Protestants do that, especially U.S. Protestants, but Catholics and Orthodox don't seem to have that.
I think I would agree with that. Yeah,
I did have another quick question for Sphincter.
Sure.
And I really don't want to say this live, but I'm assuming you won't care. If not, you can beat me up for it. Is it Josh?
Yeah, that's what I asked Sal to call me, because it's just easier. Okay. Josh is fine.
But what did you think of the discussion that I think you were there? You contributed a little bit, but you kept it mainly between Dapper and Otangelo. What did you think of that discussion?
I think Otangelo, without seeing more of him, even if he's watching or whatever, I think Otangelo is just Neff with who's nicer and gets a lot of benefit of the doubt because of his accent.
Yeah.
But he's basically Neff in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that I love about that.
Real quickly, Leo, I do want to, because I got Mr. Parker and Jefferson that need to do their thing, and then y'all can continue this after. But I've got to get to sleep. So Jefferson, promote your shit.
I just want to say, as Otangelo, I would like to invite you all to. Sorry, I've been working on trying to imitate him.
You're not as good at it as John is.
I mean, you gotta get that German Portuguese accent going.
Yeah, when he does that whole I would like to tell you about the method, which the discrepancy, or it is. He sounds like Ariana Huffington, which is hilarious to me. Anyway, I've got a debate happening probably tomorrow at 8:00. At least I hope that it's going to happen.
PM, Eastern time.
Yep, 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to be involving Philip Cornelius Amon. Rage, you debated him back around just before Thanksgiving.
That was fun.
Math Pig debated him just a couple days ago, and that kid got a thirst
a while ago.
he developed a thirst for the Jeffersons. So we're going to be having a debate tomorrow, and also this is probably disappoint a few of you. I am tentatively set up for a debate next Saturday with Gavin Herleman. The topic is going to be. What?
I'm not familiar with who that is.
Yeah, make sure you have some pants on.
I'm not gonna wear pants. I'm not even gonna wear a shirt. The only thing I'm going to be wearing is a thin layer of peanut butter from neck to nuts. That's it.
Establish dominance.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna trump him in every bad way. The topic of our debate is going to be dating of the Gospels, and not dating like taking them out for a social occasion, but
I like to wine and dine before I get fucked at least. You know?
When were they written? So it should be it's gonna be boring. It's gonna be a boring debate. I didn't really want to have it. He challenged me to it, and I was like, okay, all right, maybe. And then while I was thinking about actually turning him down, I was like, well, how much time is it going to take me to actually prepare for it? And then I realized it's going to take me 15 seconds to prepare for it.
Yeah, all you got to do is put pants on. I mean, that's it.
No, all I need to do is take them off.
Wear the pants on your head.
Yeah, I just need to take them off. So I'll be fine.
Can I ask you to start your opening statement by just opening the book and going, this is the King James, and it says 1611.
And yes, Sphincter, y'all can stay talking. StreamYard, it doesn't close down just because I leave. Mr. Parker, yep, you're up next, and then I'm going to bed.
Yeah, I think we had a pretty interesting discussion overall, and I think Leo and Steven did a pretty good job in the debate against Mad Dux Mad Dux and CJ, because they really didn't bring any argument. They were just trying to pedal back and try to yell out. They're moving the goalposts or some bullcrap. And on my channel, I haven't posted anything recently. I have I have 2 interviews. That's with Leo and Knock. Those are pretty good, I guess. And that's about it.
I think someone else wanted to get in here before you leave. Ray.
Yeah, Doubting Thomas and Red Fang.
Yep. Yeah, I'll make sure I'll look at my background before I leave. I want to thank everybody for coming on, and you're all welcome back. I thought this was a great conversation. For me, I'm kind of learning about socialism. Like I said, I became a socialist basically just being a worker, and I despise capitalism. But to actually hear an honest conversation about it, I think was very good for me. And I, of course, I side with the socialist here, but I thought that the capitalists presented their case really, really well. Even people like some
CJ presented the case really, really well.
Well, no, here,
CJ did all right.
Here, neither one of them presented their case well in the debate earlier.
I think CJ did all right.
I mean, CJ, when you're a debate partner with Smokey Saint or Mad Dux, whichever one it was going to be tonight, CJ's automatically the good guy in that situation. So
yeah, Mad Dux.
It is a low bar to do better than Mad Dux.
Yeah,
Mad Dux. See, Mad Dux. Well, the thing I've only seen a little bit of Mad Dux. Mad Dux, even when he's right, he's just insufferable. Like, why?
Yeah, but you guys keep talking because I'm playing my music. But you're good. Show's over. Y'all have a good night. Thank you for watching, and I'm sure I'll do something this weekend. Peace out.